and knowledge than ever. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Pain. It was all he could feel. It was all he could think. It consumed him completely. The hateful glares of the villagers stood by watching as the children continued to kick him. The boy was lying in the middle of the street, curled tightly in a ball, protecting his head with his hands. He could hear their jeers and taunts as they encouraged the youths in their daily beatings of the boy. Why? Was a thought that echoed in the depths of his mind that broke through the haze of pain. Why do they do this to me? Why me? As these thoughts continued to circle through his head, a low growling could be heard by the hateful crowd. They paused, listening to the noise with a growing fear. The children stopped their thrashing of the child as their parents and guardians drew them away from him. The growling slowly gained in volume. One of the braver villagers drew a kunai knife and threw it at the boy. As it pierced through the flesh of his leg, the growling suddenly changed from the low growl to a cry of pain. "Ha! See, the boy is a demon. How else can he growl so at mere children?" cried the villager who threw the kunai. His cry was answered with cheers as the mob circled closer to the boy. Many drew knives and swords, while others grabbed nearby rocks and sticks to further torture the child. As they collected their new weapons, the boy raised his head. His golden spiky locks were stained with blood and dirt. His piercing blue eyes were dull as they surveyed the crowd. 3 lines marked each of his cheeks, giving the impression of whiskers. His 3-year-old body screamed in protest against the small movement. He had a moment of dread before a stick whipped his face down, drawing blood from his cheek. "How dare you raise your head? Know your place, demon. You should have died the night you were born. Your filthy presence taints our town, and today is the day we shall finally cleanse that stain," screamed the man who had hit him. Many others joined him with their taunts and insults. None were very different from the original. "Monster, demon, devil, just die." As their insults continued to ring in his ears, their blows rained down as hard as any storm. Through the pain and fear, the boy thought desperately, "Someone, help. Help me. Please, someone save me." But he knew no one would come. No one ever came. No one loved him. No one cared for him. No one even liked him. All anyone ever did was hate or pity him. And the only people who pitied him were the old man and Iruka. But they could do nothing. They were powerless to stop these vicious rituals. The mob continued with their entertainment long into the night, only leaving when he finally lost consciousness. Little did they know the boy was still awake. He never fell unconscious during these beatings. There was always something that kept him there, forced him to endure the torture of the villagers. He felt a wave of sorrow and guilt from the dark recesses of his mind after this thought. The boy waved it away like he always did, not caring where it came from or why it cared. He stayed motionless for what seemed an eternity to make sure the entire mob had gone, and none stayed to give him a nice wake-up call. The blond boy got up slowly, wincing as his wound stretched and blood flowed freely down his body. As he tried to stand up, he realized both his legs were broken in several places, as well as numerous ribs and other bones. He could feel tears gathering in his eyes that threatened to drown him. Only the fear of someone hearing and finding him kept the tears at bay. So he simply laid there and waited. Waited for what always happened, waited for his body to heal. It was a few moments before he could feel the usual fire and warmth that came with the healing. It was why he could take the beatings every day and not have his body destroyed before the next round with the villagers. He almost smiled as the warmth enveloped him and his wounds began to heal, but he didn't. He hadn't smiled for as long as he can remember. As his limbs slowly fixed themselves, the boy's thoughts turned to the village, the Land of Fire Shinobi village. The Hidden Leaf. No matter how much they beat him, insulted him and tortured him in every sense of the word, he couldn't bring himself to hate the village. Instead, it was the shinobi that were the focus of his rage. They were the ones that always started the beatings. The ones with the masks were the worst. They could find him no matter where he hid and brought him to a crowded place so more pain could be felt. The villagers were just ignorant. He felt the last of his wounds heal and the warmth fade away. With a sigh, the boy got to his feet and began the trek home. This time the ninja had brought him to the other side of the village. The boy kept to the alleyways and shadows of buildings to avoid detection. If he were to ever go for his ninja hit I-8, he would pass the stealth part with flying colors. Not that they would even consider him a ninja. Another sigh left him as he passed the gates that marked the village entrance. A sudden silence was all the warning he had before a sharp pain penetrated his back, thrusting him forward into the ground. He lay there for a moment, dazed, before he sat up and saw his mistake. The group of shinobi had just returned to the village and had seen him walking past, uninjured. "So you escaped today's punishment, did you?" one of them asked. He had one of the masks on, so the boy didn't see any of his facial features, just the pale face of a dog and a mass of spiky silver hair. The others were tired from their mission and just left the boy alone with new tormentor. The child felt the familiar stabs of fear as he looked at the man. And no tea today I've already. He never got to finish his sentence as a foot met his face with astounding force and he was sent flying into the wall behind him. It's your fault he's dead, you demon. Yelled the man as he continued to pummel the boy and his fists coated themselves in his blood. Then the boy felt something from the man that he had never truly felt before, bloodlust. Hate-filled bloodlust. The man oozed it from every pore on his skin. Never before had someone beaten the boy with this much hate before. It shocked him and he felt the icy fingers of fear bury themselves deep into his bones. He died and you lived. How is that fair? Why does the demon deserve to live and the hero die? The man seemed to be yelling more to himself than at the boy. The boy just curled into his usual position and waited for the pain to end. I should kill you and I know how. With the jutsu that I myself created with his guidance, the man muttered finally after many agonizing hours. The boy's eyes widened as he realized that this man was actually going to end his existence. Many had threatened to but never actually committed to the act. The man stood back and made a succession of hand signs as the boy coughed up blood. A light chirping could be heard, the boy thought it was because dawn must be close and the birds were waking up. How sorely he was mistaken. Lightning had gathered around the man's hand and the whips of it against the air caused a bird-like sound. The boy instantly knew the deadliness of this weapon and desperately looked for a way to escape, but the only way out was through the gates. He had never considered leaving the village, it was his prison and his home. A place where he was beaten but a place where he could sleep. But right now the only thing the boy had in his head was survival. He started to run, away from the man and away from the hidden leaf. The man's smirk was hidden by the mask as he caught up to the fleeing child. He ran the lightning-covered arm through the boy and felt his insides burn from the contact. The boy let loose a scream of pain. His blood boiled as if every cell was on fire. The man wrenched his hand from the boy's gut and stared down at the child. He was still conscious and was still trying to flee, although he was reduced to a crawl. The man spat on the boy in disgust, turned on his heel and returned to the village. The boy kept crawling away from the village, away from the beatings and away from the pain. After many long, agonizing minutes that seemed like days, the boy realized he would not die from this. He started to weep as he kept crawling. The warmth that usually caressed him whilst healing was lost in the aftershock of the pain from the man. He kept crawling until the first rays of dawn broke over the tops of the trees and still the boy was in pain. The healing was taking longer than it usually did, probably because the attack was more serious than the others. Weariness dragged on the boy as he crawled along. Soon though he could fight back the darkness no longer and fell into the waiting arms of the abyss. Just before he blacked out he could hear someone in the distance. "Oh Kami. This boy needs serious medical attention. Shizune. Bring me my bag." 10 years later, it was early afternoon on the road to Hidden Leaf. The sun was still high in the sky, birds chirped greetings to each other in passing, and a young, blonde teenager stood on the crest of a hill and looked upon the gates to the village with sparkling eyes. He had 3 defined marks on his cheeks that gave the impression of whiskers. His hair was bright yellow and spiked in every direction possible. His eyes were the brightest blue and hid much behind their endless depths. Sitting faithfully by his side was a blood-red fox. The elegant head of the fox came up to the boy's waist and 9 bushy tails waved back and forth through the air. 10 years, it's been 10 years since I've been here. He thought to himself as he surveyed the landscape before him. Are you sure you want to go back there, kid? A menacing voice growled from inside his head. You know how they are going to treat you, even with the old woman's help. The boy heaved a sigh and looked down at the fox who was staring at him intently. I know, he thought back to the voice. But Ka-san wanted me to do this. If she thinks this is best for me then I will not question her. Stated the boy in his mind as he walked down the hill and approached the gates. Very well, but know that if those miserable excuses of people do anything, I am here if you need me, growled the voice softly before fading away, back to the depths of his mind, and the fox trotted after his master. Thank you Kyubi, whispered the blonde out loud before turning his attention to the looming village. The boy was dressed in simple traveler's clothes with only minimal hints of his ninja background. A plain black shirt covered with a dark orange jacket with many pockets hid his numerous kunai knives. A vicious-looking sword was strapped to his back, which ran nearly the entire length of the boy. His lower half was covered by baggy black pants with a shuriken holster strapped to his right thigh. He smiled briefly remembering the bright orange jumpsuit he used to wear. If it wasn't for Ka-san I would still be wearing it, he silently chuckled to himself. His ability to smile again had been recovered months after he was saved that dark day that led him from this village. Halt. A voice demanded, breaking the boy from his thoughts. He had arrived at the village entrance and the guard had stopped him before he walked through the gates. Sorry, I was lost in my thoughts, the boy quickly apologized. State your business, insisted the guard, nothing in his voice hid the suspicion and caution at the sight of the large fox next to him. Yeah, I'm here to see the Hokage, answered the boy smiling. Do you have an appointment? Nope. Does the Lord Hokage know you're coming? No, is there anyone in this village who can vouch for your identity? I don't think so, no, replied the boy, pausing to think for a moment. The fox at his side chuckled silently. Then, as required by law, you must leave this village immediately or be arrested and interrogated as to your intentions within these walls, said the guard rather tiredly. Obviously he expected the blue-eyed blonde to turn around and leave, not to continue on into the village. This was what the lad was doing. Hey! Stop! Yelled the guard, grabbing him by the collar of his shirt and dragging him back. I said you had to leave. Not continue walking. No, you said I had to leave or will be interrogated as to my intentions. Well, I already told you my intentions. I'm here to see the Hokage. I want to talk to him, said the boy calmly, but on the inside he was holding back from growling and throwing the man for grabbing him in such a way. His hands curled into fists. Sorry kid, but not just anybody can go and see the Hokage, let alone enter this village without some form of identification, the guard informed the boy. Oh well, why didn't you just say so? I have a letter here from Ka-sen saying who I am, he replied chirpily. Ahahaha. Sorry kid, but just cause your mama says you're special doesn't mean you can go and see the Hokage. Laughed the man. Do you even know who my Ka-sen is? Argued the boy, just read the freaking letter. Insisted the child. Okay, chortled the guard, still giggling from how much of a mummy's boy this kid was. He opened the parchment and read what was inside. Dear Hidden Leaf Gate Guard, I am well aware of your position in letting an unidentifiable person, such as the boy and fox you see in front of you, through the gates without any form of assurance he is not an assassin or a spy from a neighboring village or country. However, as true as this may be, if you continue to refuse this boy entry into the village hidden in the leaves, then I will personally hunt you down and make sure you recognize your mistake. My son and his pet are to be treated with the utmost care and consideration when entering this village. If they are mistreated in any way, then the consequences will be making you wish for death. Regards, Tsunade Senju, member of the Sannin, granddaughter to the first Hokage of Leaf, Senju Hashirama. The boy watched in satisfaction as the guard's face paled as he reread the letter 3 times. Trust Ka-sen to make someone sweat from a letter, he smirked to himself. He could hear Kyuubi's laughter echo throughout his mind. Fang had a look on his face that could only be described as a grin. My deepest apologies, honorable son, exclaimed the guard, I will promptly escort you to the Hokage's building forthwith. The boy watched as he scrambled to regain favor with the son of one of the legendary Sannin. Smiling, the boy stepped into the village for the first time in 10 years. Don't worry about it and stop with that honorable son crap, just call me Naruto. Short chapter 1. No, sorry. But the others are gonna be longer. Stay tuned for more. The third Hokage was having a horrible day. First, one of his Jounins tried to steal one of the village's prized secret scrolls, then his grandson broke the record of attempted assassination of him today, and now sitting in front of him with a goofy grin on his face looking around the room was none other than the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox demon and his pet fox. He heaved a sigh, the Sandaime knew after this encounter he would have a migraine the size of the Hokage mountain. Naruto could feel the eyes of the Hokage studying him and smirked on the inside. He has no idea how to handle me now, no idea of what my skills are, and no idea on whether I hold a grudge against the village, he thought to himself. Can you blame the man? Answered the Kyuubi, looking up at him. You disappear one day with no warning and suddenly reappear 10 years later, claiming to be the son of one of the Sannin no less. I would hate to be in his position. My, is the killer fox going sentimental? Teased the boy. Shut up kid, he was the one of the only people who ever treated you like you were an actual person. He may still be a lowly human, but he is far better than those other wretches of this miserable village. I still don't get why you want to actually help their sorry asses, protested the great demon lord. The fox by Naruto's side lifted the side of his mouth to bear a fang. Naruto just smiled and continued to survey the Hokage's office. Why are you here, Naruto? The question brought him from his thoughts and he turned to regard the old man. This is my home, he replied simply. The third frowned. You have been missing for 10 years and many believe you to be dead. From what I can gather, you have been adopted by Tsunade and were most likely happier with her than you have ever been with this village. I suppose instead of why I should ask you what do you want? Naruto smiled brightly. Leave it to the third to figure out he had an ulterior motive to returning. Ka-sen said she wanted me to get proper experience as a ninja instead of the brawls I'm usually dragged into with her over money problems. She said she taught me as much as she can, so she sent me here. I want to apply for the Genin exams that take place tomorrow, he explained, wincing slightly as the memories of some of the past fights wormed their way into his head. The third was speechless. You want to what? I want to be a ninja and go for my Genin hit I-8, repeated the blonde. But, you've had no training, protested the Hokage. The other students have been studying to be ninja at the academy for 6 years. Minimum. Not mentioning the training they do at home and in their spare time. You wouldn't be able to keep up with the others, let alone pass. He continued to rant and rave until Naruto finally decided to stop him. With a kunai at his throat. "Old man, I understand your reasons, but I am nothing like the punch bag I was before I left this village," growled the boy as he pressed the cold metal against the man's jugular. "For 10 years I have been training under Ka-san. One of the freaking Sannin. I know what's inside of me and I know of my heritage. I have power that you could hardly understand. I know you are saying this out of worry for me, but believe me. I am perfectly capable of handling myself." And with that he pulled the kunai back and sat back down. The third Hokage paused, thinking deeply about the implications this young child had insinuated. If he knew about the demon in him, then he could have access to his chakra and infinite knowledge, and if he really did know his heritage, Kami help us, he could be even more powerful than he was at his prime. Clearing his throat to get the blonde's attention, the third Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village made his decision. "Very well, Naruto. In light of the evidence you have shown me," he rubbed his throat slightly, "I have decided you shall participate in the Genin exams with my personal recommendation. I shall be your sponsor and caretaker as long as you live in this village without a guardian. You can live in your father's house that is located near the West Forest. It is protected by blood seals, so to get in you, I know how to get an old man." "I am well informed about many types of seals," interrupted the boy, who was grinning widely at his acceptance for the exam. "Very well. The exam takes place at precisely 0700 tomorrow morning in the academy. Do not do anything that would shame your name and in turn mine," he warned before smiling hugely. "Welcome back, Naruto." Naruto and Kyuubi walked through the village, observing the people and slowly making their way to Naruto's new house. Many of the villagers gave him suspicious or fearful looks due to the large fox trotting beside him. Naruto ignored them. He was used to people judging him. As he neared the West Forest, he passed the nobles' district, where prestigious families such as the Hyugas and Uchihas reside. A sharp whistling was all the warning he had before a shuriken buried itself in the ground just beyond his feet. Naruto paused and stared at the weapon, whilst Kyuubi sniffed at it. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" demanded a voice. Naruto turned to see a group of kids his age staring at him. The one who had thrown the shuriken standing at the head of the group. He had black hair that spiked up in the back and reminded Naruto of a duck's ass. His onyx eyes stared at him coldly. "Don't you usually introduce yourself before asking someone their name?" asked Naruto, ignoring the piece of metal at his feet. He continued on. "Hey. Wait. Only nobles are allowed in this area of the village, and their guests," protested a girl with pink hair and matching dress. "Who were you invited by? I've never seen you around the village before," continued the pink-haired girl. Kyuubi had finished inspecting the shuriken and had now decided to inspect the girl. Pinky squealed like the little girl she is as the curious fox sniffed her up and down. Naruto held back a chuckle. Who knew the mighty demon lord would be acting like a curious cat? Naruto said in his head. He was shortly answered by a growl. "I need to act the part, don't I? This fox body has its own desires that I cannot control. I don't say anything about your primal desires, so you don't say anything about mine," retorted the great fox demon. Naruto just laughed silently. "Restrain your beast," screamed the pink-haired girl as the fox finished sniffing all he could on 4 legs and had opted to placing 2 paws on her front to sniff her face. His tail swung back and forth energetically. "And I meant to be the kid?" he asked silently, chuckling. "Shut it. Now call me over so they think you have some sense of control over me. I like the name Fang," he added. Naruto could feel the beast grinning in his head. Of course he had to pick a freaky name, at least it's better than Kyuubi. He would probably be chased out of town if he called the fox that. Shaking his head, still smirking, the blonde called for the fox. "Fang. Come here, stop harassing the girl. You've already eaten today," called the boy. The rest of the group visibly flinched at the implication of the fox eating human flesh. Kyuubi gave a fox grin at the girl before licking her face and quickly padding over to his master, sat beside him and surveyed the group. The blonde-haired Kunoichi had come and helped the shaky pink-haired one, saying soothing words to calm down the girl. Naruto was dumbfounded on how anyone could be traumatized by getting licked in the face from a friendly animal, not that they knew he was far, far from friendly. The duck-butt-haired guy was still glaring daggers at Naruto, not noticing the distress of one of his friends. "I asked you who you were and why you are in my clan's house," repeated the black-haired boy. Naruto quickly looked around him and discovered he was in the Uchiha clan's district. "Sorry for intruding, but I was just taking a shortcut to my house. If you'll excuse me," Naruto politely bowed and continued on his way, hands in his pockets and whistling an aimless tune. The boy who threw the shuriken quickly thought. The only other houses in that direction are reserved for the Hokage council members. I'm pretty sure I have never seen him here before, so he must be trying to break in somewhere to steal something. I will not have my home desecrated by some blonde idiot. Out loud he said. "You still haven't told me who you are," Plus foxes are shunned in this village, and your house can't be that way, only Hokage and council members are permitted beyond the West Forest. A sigh could be heard from the pink and blonde-haired Kunoichi, Sasuke-kun is so smart they gushed. Naruto had to hold back the nausea that threatened to overcome him. Well, Sasuke-kun, my house is that way so you're wrong there, and Fang cannot and will not be separated from me, good luck trying, and I wish you a quick death, not like his usual ones, answered Naruto looking at the fox, who grinned at the mention of his name. Inky screeched at this statement, and Sasuke was wincing on the inside, but his cold demeanor didn't betray his real thoughts. You still didn't tell us your name. He stated. Naruto scratched his head, thinking. What do you think, Kyuubi? Should I tell them my full name? Adopted name? Or a fake name? He asked quietly in his mind. It's your choice, kid, but if they follow you then they'll figure it out once you get to your house. You'll save yourself a headache if you tell them now, mind you, you'll still get a headache just now not later, said the Kyuubi in a rather bored tone. Running his hand through his blonde hair, Naruto made his choice. My name is Naruto, he said simply, then turned around and continued on towards his house, leaving a frustrated Sasuke behind. It was everything he ever wanted in a house. It was a house of dreams. Naruto simply stared at the giant estate. It was surrounded by the forest and only if you knew where to look could you see the house. It wasn't as grand as the Hyugas or as spacious as the Uchihas, but it was majestic. Just by looking you could tell it once housed the strongest and wisest of all shinobi. Its 3 stories were supported by decorative banisters that made it blend into the surroundings. As Naruto stepped up to the perimeter he felt a force that made him unable to continue forward. Frowning, he pushed against the force only to be shoved back a few feet. He heard a slight snickering from the bushes and he frowned further. Those kids had followed him, wanting to find out where he lived. He gritted his teeth in annoyance. He should have picked up on them the moment they started following him, not now when they made a mistake. He was lucky he didn't talk to Kyuubi using his real name. He muttered a string of curses under his breath. Kyuubi bounced up to Naruto and gave him a pleading look. Naruto smiled. Don't scare them too bad. He said in answer to the look. Kyuubi yipped in joy and ran off into the forest. Have fun. He called after the fox. Smirking he returned to the barrier around his new house and brought out a kunai. He pulled back his sleeve, baring the flesh of his arm, and brought the razor-sharp blade down. Sasuke was pissed. The pink and blonde Kunoichi, known in Sakura and Ino, followed him everywhere nowadays, and now he was trapped against a rock face by the blood-red fox that was following that suspicious blonde guy around this afternoon. The fact that Sasuke was following him is irrelevant, he was Sasuke Uchiha. He had the right to know anything that happened near his home. The fox grinned playful and nipped at Sasuke's feet, causing him to stumble back, his back hit a stony wall. He was alone in facing this creature. The others had fled the minute the fox had shown up in their hiding spot, hoping to find out something about Naruto, growling menacingly at them. Sasuke was the only one who stayed to fight the beast. Sasuke threw a handful of shuriken at the beast, all aiming for vital points. Kyuubi neatly dodged them all and leaped at the boy. The fox opened his jaws, presenting a line of deadly fangs, and held them a breath away from the child's throat. Sasuke froze in fear. Is this where it ends? He thought to himself. No. I still have things to do. I must avenge my family and I must kill him. Were his last thoughts as the fox descended. Fang. Yelled a voice. Fang, come look at this. You won't believe the stuff I found. The fox paused, his teeth seconds away from piercing Sasuke's neck. A whine came from the fox when the blonde-haired boy emerged from the tree. Naruto took one look at the scene before collapsing with laughter. Sasuke was shocked. He wouldn't admit he needed help, but to just laugh at him when he is about to be devoured by the boy's pet is beyond cold. Haha, are you getting soft in your old age, Fang? Wheezed the boy when he finally got control of the mirth that racked his body. At this the fox lifted his head, snapped his mighty jaws shut, and growled at the boy. Naruto stopped laughing and studied the boy. You're right he doesn't, does he? He answered an unvoiced question. The fox nodded his head as if he understood what the boy said. Nah, and here I thought I would finally have some blackmail material on you, pouted the child. Sasuke was beyond confused at this one-sided conversation. What the hell are you on about? He demanded, interrupting Naruto's conversation with himself. Oh yeah, you're still here, he mused to himself. I was just teasing Fang about not scaring you off properly, but apparently you didn't run when the others did and fought back. He likes you, that's why he played with you for a bit, he said to the black-haired boy. Sasuke stared at Naruto, his mouth hanging open slightly. That was playing. Haha yeah, otherwise you would have been dead already without even seeing him, smirked the boy, amused at Sasuke's disbelief. Sasuke quickly looked at the fox that had an evil grin on its face before it whipped a tail in its face and raced over to its master. Well, what did you mean when you said he doesn't, does he? Demanded Sasuke. Naruto quirked an eyebrow at his arrogant attitude. And, pray tell, why should I explain myself to you? When you're the one stalking me and fighting with my beloved pet. Naruto countered. Sasuke was about to retort to this insolent question when a low menacing growl interrupted him. The fox, Fang had turned his head towards the blonde-haired boy and had lifted up its hackles at the last statement. "What's wrong with it now?" questioned Sasuke wearily. Naruto just smiled goofily. He just doesn't like to be referred to as a pet. He thinks he is the almighty great Lord Fox and people should worship the ground he walks on, for they are no better than flea-ridden meat sacks, good only for stating his pompous appetite, announced the boy grandly, as if he were introducing a noble at a ball. The effect was lost by the heavy sarcastic tone and the boy's multiple eye rolls. Sasuke snorted at this, which made Naruto gasp in surprise. "Oh. So you can laugh. I thought the stick that you so righteously shoved up your ass was stuck there permanently," grinned the boy. Sasuke frowned at this. This guy is an idiot, he thought to himself. "No. I was simply laughing at you for thinking that a mere animal can understand you," shot the steely-eyed Uchiha. Naruto lost his grin and looked at Kyuubi with caution. "He dares to call me a mere animal?" roared the demon in Naruto's mind. Now he doesn't know who he's talking to," quickly said the blonde in an effort to calm the raging creature. His pleas fell on deaf ears. Kyuubi had his head lowered and legs crouched in preparation for launching himself at the insolent child. His eyes glowed red and his pupils were black slits. White fangs were bared as the growl increased in volume. Sasuke stared at the fox and fear blossomed in his chest. Maybe insulting the beast was a bad idea, he thought to himself before the kitsune let out a soul-shattering roar. Never before had the Uchiha heard anything so cold and bloodthirsty. The sound was layered with hate and contempt and frightened Sasuke to his core. "Ah, there it is," Naruto said quietly, cutting off Kyuubi's roar. The fox ran up to Sasuke and stared into his eyes before giving off a little yip of approval and licking his cheek. Naruto smirked at this but decided to tease the fox about it later. Right now he needed to deal with a very confused Uchiha in front of him. "What's there?" asked Sasuke when he gathered his thoughts. The roar had shocked him, but the lick on his cheek shocked him even more. Still grinning, Naruto sat down in front of the Uchiha and Kyuubi laid down beside him, wrapping his 9 tails about the boy and resting his head on his paws. "Here," said Naruto simply. Sasuke furrowed his brow as he tried to understand what he was saying. Seeing as the boy was getting nowhere, Naruto decided to elaborate. "Fang hates to be belittled and underestimated. Plus you intrigued him when you showed no fear of him as he was about to break your neck. So he decided that he wanted to scare you enough to show that you should fear him. He probably wants you to revere him as well, but he knows that's never gonna happen," he explained. "Oh, and he can understand you and is probably smarter than any person you've ever met, so I advise against calling him a mere animal," finished Naruto chuckling slightly. Sasuke was dumbfounded with this new information about the fox, who right now was following a butterfly's flight pattern with his nose. "Who are you?" asked Sasuke again, this time a little less arrogantly. Naruto sighed. "I've said already, my name is Naruto," the blonde boy said in a monotone. "He's hiding something. Something about his last name, or parents or clan, or damn it, he's hiding everything about himself. I only know his name," Sasuke thought in frustration. Naruto smirked at Sasuke's expression. Messing with people can be so much fun, he thought to himself. He faintly heard the Kyuubi chuckle in the back of his mind. "That doesn't tell me anything," exploded the Uchiha. He was tired of all the mind games and word tricks. He wanted answers. "How come I've never seen you before? Why are you in the nobles district? Who gave you permission to come here? Why are you in this village?" demanded the Uchiha. Naruto thought for a minute while Sasuke was trying to regain his cool. "You've never seen me before because I arrived in the village today. I am in the nobles district cause this is where I now live. The Hokage gave me permission to be here. And I'm in this village because Ka-san wants me to be a ninja, so I'm here to take the Genin exams tomorrow," answered Naruto, counting each question of his fingers. "Is that enough of the Spanish Inquisition today? I'm hungry and I want to go home. Your parents are probably wondering where you are," added Naruto. Wrong thing to say, he thought instantly as a dark look came across Sasuke's face. "I don't have parents, so I can keep you here as long as I want," covering his moment of weakness with that one arrogant statement. "So he's kinda like me," thought Naruto. Instead he said, "Well, you know all about me now, so tell me about you. Name, family, likes, dislikes and stuff like that." "So far all I know is that them girls called you Sasuke-kun," finishing his sentence in a mock girl tone. Sasuke looked at him for a moment, his face blank of all emotion. "My name is Sasuke Uchiha, last of the Uchiha clan, holders of the Dojutsu Sharingan. I don't like many things and dislike everything else." Naruto whistled lowly. "You're an Uchiha, huh? He will be a powerful ninja when he gets his head out of his asses," thought Naruto. Of course he had heard of the Uchiha massacre. That was before he had even left the village. One of their own slaughtered everyone within the Uchiha compound, leaving only one alive, the cold-eyed jerk in front of him now apparently. Not a problem with that. demanded Sasuke. No, no. Just wondering why the great and almighty Uchiha is bothered with little old me. Wondered Naruto out loud. Sasuke frowned at his disrespect to his clan, but was wondering that himself. Lots of people came into the village every day, but for some reason he felt drawn to this one strange boy. There was something about him that intrigued Sasuke and made him wary of him as well. Was it the way he carried himself? Like an animal constantly on guard, stalking its prey. Or the way his eyes held that spark of mischief that in one moment turned from amusing to deadly. Either way, there was something about this boy that made Sasuke connect with as much as he hated creating bonds with other people. Yuke. Sasuke. Sasuke. Yelled the blonde, trying to bring the onyx-eyed boy out of his thoughts. He looked up and around him, noticing that it had gotten dark during their conversation. The fox had its head resting in Naruto's lap and was dozing, while the boy the fox was using as a pillow was staring at him with a hint of concern. "You okay there? You fully spaced out for a while," stated Naruto. Unknown to Sasuke, he was checking his vital signs. "Sorry, just lost in my thoughts," said Sasuke. Wait. Did he just apologize? Him? The great Sasuke Uchiha, he never apologized. He was always right and the other person always wrong. This was seriously messed up. He started to feel dizzy and got up too fast. He swayed on his feet before feeling something support him. Looking down, he saw the fox leaning against his thigh, staring up at him with those blood-red eyes. "You sure you're okay? You might have caught something sitting here for hours," asked Naruto. "Will you be able to make it back to your compound all right? It's pretty far from here, and if you don't know where here is then you're pretty screwed," Naruto said, frowning slightly. He was torn between helping someone and keeping people out of his home. He didn't want to make too many routes here in case it made it harder for him to leave. Sasuke snorted. "I'm fine, idiot. I have the exam tomorrow so I won't get sick and I know my way around here like the back of my hand," he claimed, putting on a front to once again cover for his weakness. The cocky attitude settled it for Naruto. "That's it, you're staying at my place tonight," he said flatly, leaving no room for argument. It didn't stop Sasuke from trying anyway. But before a sound even came out of his mouth, Naruto spoke over him with his fingers held up. 1. You don't know where you are, so you would just get lost trying to find your way back home. 2. You are obviously tired from today and are feeling weaker than normal, so I doubt you could even make it home. 3. I need someone to show me to the academy tomorrow morning as I am taking the exam too. Counting off each point as he said it. Sasuke glared at him. Then frowned more. "You're taking the exam tomorrow?" he asked. "Yeah, I said my Kosen wanted me to be a ninja, but you haven't been through the academy. How are you going to get let into the exam?" "Personal recommendation from Kosen and the Hokage, they say I have enough experience and power to pass the exam, so I am allowed to take it," Naruto answered, smiling, remembering how he convinced the Hokage to let him take the exam. Bet that the old man hasn't had a scare like that in a while, he thought with satisfaction. Sasuke was once again speechless at this boy who just walked into his life. "Personal recommendation from the Hokage?" he asked in disbelief. Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, him and Kosen," he confirmed. "Wait, who's your Kosen? I don't even know his last name," he thought to himself. "She'd rather I didn't tell people about her yet. Rather I prove myself with my own skills than brag with her name," Naruto answered, shrugging his shoulders. Sasuke stored this bit of information in the back of his head. Frowning, he was torn between accepting the boy's offer, using his own stupidity, at not being able to find the academy by himself of course, or saving his dignity and attempt to walk back to his house. His Uchiha pride won over and he stated with as much arrogance as he could muster, "I have no need to take residence in your house tonight, I am perfectly capable of finding my own way home. If you have need of my help, then meet me out front of my compound tomorrow morning at 6 and you can follow me to the academy." Naruto smirked at his self-righteous attitude and decided it's slide. "Thank you for your most gracious and humbling offer, oh great Sasuke. I fear my presence taints you, so I shall remove myself. Until tomorrow then," Naruto finished with an exaggerated bow, grinning the whole time, before getting up and walking back to his new house, Kyuubi on his heels. "Idiot," thought Sasuke as he made his way back home. "At least it's going to be interesting tomorrow." Naruto was seriously regretting his decision of allowing the Uchiha to show him the way to the academy. He was receiving many curious looks of almost every passerby and death glares from every female in the village. Kyuubi was loving the attention and was frolicking around their legs as they walked, showing off his fluffy tails and graceful body. He wanted to keep a low profile for at least a week. It was like they'd never seen the Uchiha with another living being before. Naruto snorted at this thought. "Yeah, with his awesome attitude, he must be the friendliest guy here." He chuckled to himself. Sasuke looked back at the blonde and noticed his grin. "What's so funny, loser?" Naruto frowned at this new nickname Sasuke had been so kind to give him. "Your face," was all he said, then ran ahead to avoid a kunai to the throat. Many of the witnesses heaved a sigh of relief. This was the Sasuke they all knew. Indifferent to everyone but when you pushed his buttons, deadly. They arrived at the academy gate slightly out of breath from the mini-war they had on the way there. Sasuke straightened up and made his face blank of all emotion. Even the flush he got from running was wiped from his face. Naruto looked at him curiously before they headed in different directions. Sasuke had to get to his class and Naruto had to be enrolled for the day. As Naruto waited outside the classroom to be introduced to the rest of the class, he turned to the fox by his side and spoke to him seriously. "Please, try and restrain yourself from sniffing everybody in there," he whispered urgently. "I do not want you kicked out for causing a scene. Try to use your best behavior. If you do, there'll be a rabbit in for you," he bargained. Hoping the message will stick. "Make it 3 and you have a deal." "You worry too much, kid. From what I can smell, someone has a liking for bugs and another for dogs. We shouldn't stand out much," was the creature's calm reply. And that's no excuse. You almost ate the pink chick from yesterday. Just stay by my side and look cute, you've been pulling it off rather well lately," he added as an afterthought. Kyuubi growled. 2.5 and I do not do cute. I am a feared demon in the underworld and you will do good to remember that, kid. And I didn't eat her, I was just trying to figure out how there could be a pink-furred human. Haven't seen one before. The fox mused. "Deal, now shut up and don't speak to me unless it's urgent. I don't want people to think I'm crazy and talk to myself." The blonde had barely finished talking when the door in front of him opened and his new sensei stood there. He stared at him blankly for a minute before whispering, "Then Naruto?" Naruto smiled at the man. "Hello, Iruka-sensei. Long time no see," he said bubbly to the shocked ninja. He liked Iruka. He was decent to him when he was young, before he left the village. "You're the new student today who's taking the exam?" he asked in disbelief. "Yup. The old man gave me his recommendation and so did Kasan," explained the blonde youth. Iruka frowned at the mention of a Kasan. The boy was an orphan. Both his parents died when he was born. He decided to talk to the Hokage about it later. Right now the other students in his class were getting curious as to why he was standing in the doorway for so long. "Attention class. Today we have a new student who will be participating in the Genin exams with you. Please make him feel welcome," announced Iruka, stepping aside to reveal Naruto and Kyuubi. "Please introduce yourself." "Hi. My name is Naruto and this is Fang. We arrived yesterday. Pleased to meet you all," Naruto recited, a little bored. He surveyed the class, a few stood out. Sasuke was sitting by himself, staring out a window, oblivious to Naruto's arrival. No surprises there. The pink and blonde-haired Kunoichi were sitting directly behind him, ignoring Naruto and fawning over the dark-haired wonder. Some guy was sleeping next to another guy who was stuffing his face with chips. Naruto noticed them for their chakra signals, they were more developed than most. The last 3 that caught Naruto's eye were the ones with a funny sense. One boy who wore a trench coat and he had the scent of insects about him. What interested Naruto that it wasn't just about him the scent lingered, it was in him too. The Kunoichi that sat with him was incredibly shy and refused to meet his eyes, but her chakra signal was way sophisticated. Must be a noble, Naruto thought before he turned his gaze to the last guy. He had the scent of dogs about him and looked a bit feral too. Naruto thought he was strange with his whisker marks. This guy had claws and fangs of a dog and had out makeup on under his eyes to add to his charm. Naruto's attention was distracted by the puppy the boy had who had stood up on the table and was now growling at the blonde boy and his fox. Naruto quirked an eyebrow at his behavior. "Hey. Akamaru. Calm down, will ya? What's wrong?" The dog boy asked his pet, curious as to what could get the usual docile puppy so riled up. The mutt thinks I'm invading his territory. Little does he know that all the lands are mine." The Kyuubi's voice echoed in Naruto's head. Naruto looked down at the fox that had turned its gaze towards the dog. "Boy. New kid. Get your fox to admit dominance as Akamaru's, otherwise it's gonna get hurt. And I'm not gonna be responsible for him defending his territory," shouted the dog boy, getting Naruto's attention. The blue-eyed boy looked at the other kid incredulously. "You think that Fang would lose to the puppy?" he asked, trying to make sure he heard right. "Hell yeah he would. Akamaru may be small, but he could beat almost everybody here," boasted the kid proudly. The rest of the class laughed at Naruto's impending embarrassment of his animal losing. Akamaru was still growling at Kyuubi, his hackle raised. The fox just yawned, causing Naruto to snort in amusement and the dog boy to stare in disbelief. No animal has ever gone against Akamaru before. The scene between the two animals had gotten the attention of the rest of the class, including Sasuke and the Kunoichi behind him. Sasuke raised an eyebrow at the scene while Pinky gave a little shriek. "That's the fox and the boy from yesterday. That fox almost ate us all. Sasuke had to fight it off for us all to escape. It should be put down," she screamed, informing the rest of the class about their little adventure yesterday. Naruto grinned and Sasuke sighed. Man, girls were annoying. Fang didn't eat anyone, he just scared you off cause you were following me, explained Naruto. And Sasuke didn't fight him off, in fact they became friends, he added with an evil smirk. Sasuke frowned at the boy, but his comeback was interrupted by a bark. Akamaru had had enough of waiting for obedience and had launched himself at Kyuubi. Naruto was surprised when he read the dog's chakra levels, they were on par with some of the other students here. Naruto just smiled and turned to Iruka who was watching with caution. "Excuse me sensei, but can I sit down now?" he asked innocently, as if the animal war in front of him wasn't going on. Kyuubi just sat there as the furry projectile launched itself at him. So much for not making a scene, he thought to himself as he stretched lazily, avoiding the puppy as he did so. Akamaru landed and growled at the fox before launching himself again. Kyuubi looked calmly at the animal before whipping out one of his tails and tripping the creature. Akamaru got to his feet and attacked again, only to be diverted with another tail. Yeah, sure, just pick any seat, he said distractedly, watching the fox play with the dog. Kyuubi finally got tired of messing with the puppy. Stretching a bit he focused his gaze on the furious animal. Akamaru was inches away from the fox when he found he could not move. Each of his limbs was held down by a tail and his torso held down by 3 more. Akamaru stopped his struggling and stared at the larger animal with a hint of fear. The classroom fell quiet as they waited to see who the victor was. A low, menacing growl slowly built in Kyuubi's throat that erupted into an ear-shattering roar. Naruto went over to the fox and hit him on the head, effectively cutting off the sound. "Remember our deal," he said to the fox quietly, making sure he was the only one who heard. At least Kyuubi had the dignity to look bashful before he released the pup and nudged him with his nose. Akamaru stared at the majestic fox, gave a happy bark and ran back to his master, whose mouth was hanging open. Now to find a seat, thought Naruto, scanning the class before he picked the perfect one. "Thank you," Naruto chirped to Iruka as he made his way to the seat he wanted, the one beside Sasuke, with his fox following faithfully by his side. Everyone in the class held their breath as Naruto took the seat and his fox made himself comfy between the two. No one had ever dared to sit next to the Uchiha, not even his fangirls. Yet here is this boy who happily sat down beside him and turned to him and said, "Hey Sasuke. Is class always this hectic? We will now begin the Genin exams. There are 2 parts as well as an extra credit that is optional. The first part is the written exam and will take approximately 2 hours. The second part is practical and you will be tested on your ninjutsu, taijutsu and kinjutsu. For extra credit you may perform a jutsu of your choice to impress the proctors. Depending on your performance, you will become shinobi of the leaf by the end of the day. Any questions?" Iruka and another shinobi were standing at the front of the class, informing the students about the exam. Naruto looked bored. "Ka-san taught me everything I need to know, so the written will be a piece of cake. Taijutsu, ninjutsu and kinjutsu will be even easier. I don't carry that sword around for nothing," he grinned to himself, referring to the body-length sword he usually carried around but has been kept in a storage scroll whilst in the village. Didn't want to draw more attention to him. "Wonder what jutsu I should perform for extra credit," he mused silently. Unaware to him, the black-haired Uchiha was watching him closely. He doesn't look fazed in the least. Though I would have been disappointed if he got freaked over the exam after yesterday. If he is able to control an animal that powerful, he must have plenty of tricks up his sleeve. He was thinking to himself. His thoughts were interrupted though, when one of the proctors put the paper down in front of him. "You have 2 hours. Begin," barked Iruka from the front of the class. Sasuke put the blonde out of his mind as he studies the paper before him, none of it was anything new. He picked up his pencil and started answering questions. The room filled with the sound of lead on paper and many groans from students who hadn't studied enough. He was halfway through his test when he heard a light snoring. Wondering who in the class, other than Shikamaru, laziest ninja alive, would be cocky enough to sleep through the exam, Sasuke looked around the class. He didn't have to look far as the blonde-haired boy next to him answered his question. Naruto had his head resting in his arms and was completely knocked out. Kyuubi had seen that he was asleep, jumped in his lap and offered the boy his tails as a pillow. Naruto shifted in his sleep to accommodate the fox. When they both got comfy, sleep quickly claimed them again. Sasuke just looked at the pair in disbelief. He wasn't even halfway through his test and was most likely ahead of the majority of the class. He quickly looked at Naruto's page that was peeking out from his arm. It was completely filled with neat handwriting, filling nearly every crevice on the page. Sasuke was dumbfounded, again. There was something this kid was hiding. How could he be so smart? He must have had intensive training. Sasuke shuddered as he remembered the hours he put into becoming as good as he is. This guy had obviously gone further. What am I thinking? I need to finish this exam. He thought, shaking himself slightly and returned to his paper. Pens down. Hand your papers to the proctors as they come down each aisle. The authoritative voice woke Naruto with a start. He yawned and stretched, eyeing the class. Many looked worried about their answers, and some were still trying to cram as much as they could onto their papers. Naruto smirked. He had passed with ease. All of these questions he could have answered when he was 5. Those to show how much of a Spartan Ka-san is with her training, he thought, shuddering at the memories of Tsunade and him training. He quickly glanced over at his bench partner, expecting him to be in the same state of panic the others were, but was surprised to see him staring out the window, his head resting on one of his hands. Well, the mighty Uchiha must have some brains in him if he's this calm, or he's just really cocky and thinks he's aced it anyway. His thoughts were interrupted once again by Iruka giving instructions about the next part of the exam. When your name is called, please come down to the front of the class and perform the taijutsu techniques asked of you. After that, please return to your seat and wait for the next part of the exam. This was the part Naruto had been waiting for. He hoped he wasn't first so he could observe the level of the other students and therefore dumb down his talent so he doesn't stand out. But of course the universe is a jerk and the first name to be called out was Naruto. Please come down to the front. Naruto sighed and picked Kyuubi of his lap and placed him on his seat before walking down to the front of the class. He could feel the stares of all the other students on him, wondering just how good this new kid really is. Please take your fighting stance, instructed Iruka. Naruto could see a proctor taking a different fighting stance across from him. Kenji-sensei will attack you and you will respond in the assigned techniques. Understood? Yes, sensei. Naruto said, bored tone creeping in slightly. Very well, Kenji-sensei will attack you with a straight left hook, you will respond by blocking the attack and initiating a counter-attack of your choice. From then on it will be free sparring and we will grade you on how well you stand up against a fellow shinobi. Yes, sensei. Naruto said again, this time not bothering to hide his impatient sigh. The ninja in front of him, Kenji, was obviously offended with his attitude and a slight malicious shine came into his eyes. The student body grinned at the stage in front of them. Kenji-sensei had a short temper and if you were on the receiving end of it, you would be in the hospital within minutes of the words leaving your mouth. He wasn't a well-liked teacher and there were numerous rumors about him abusing many young children, but none were proven and if you dared to go against him, well, those who had decided to move town. The dog boy, Kiba, was smiling more than the others. This was the perfect way to get back at the new kid for the humiliation he had suffered earlier. Kyuubi lifted his head from his paws and yawned after his nap, being awakened after all the noise. Seeing his master in a fighting pose, he gave a little growl and jumped down from Naruto's seat to go stand by his master. It's alright Fang, Naruto said, his eyes never leaving his opponents. The fox paused, tilted its head to one side before sitting down out in front of the class, but away from the fight. He gave a yip to say he understood, causing Naruto to turn and smile at him. The moment his back was turned, Kenji struck. Fortunately for Naruto, he was prepared for such an underhanded trick. Fighting in brawls most of his life, he had learned to defend against a lot of them. As Kenji's fist flew straight towards his chin, Naruto quickly sidestepped and avoided the blow. Remembering the instructions was to block, he raised his hands and grabbed a hold of the fist and using his momentum, threw the abusive instructor over his shoulder and into the wall. The class was stunned. No one had ever gotten the upper hand against Kenji before. Cursing could be heard from the pile on the floor that was the fallen instructor. Bad move kid, he growled quietly but full of malice. Now it's time to spar. His sick twisted grin showed Naruto the delight he gained from beating weaker opponents. This revelation erased the boredom Naruto was experiencing until now. Remembering his own tortured past, his mind was made up. Exam or no, he would put this bastard into his place. Kenji gave a battle cry as he launched himself at Naruto. Naruto easily dodged the attack and before Kenji could move to attack again, his gaze was filled with the sight of a black-clad foot. The force of the kick sent him flying back. Naruto could feel the nose of his opponent break when he sent him flying. Turning to Iruka, he asked, how long do we spar for? First blood. Iruka looked at the once weak child and answered sadly, until your proctor decides whether or not you are able to pass or you fail. Iruka hated Kenji. He always failed his examinees. Never gave them a chance to fight back before he beat them to a bloody pulp. And there was nothing he could do about it. The rest of the class must have known this because Naruto could hear murmurs of sympathy and the distinct sound of people betting on how bad his injuries will be. He smirked. They had no idea. The kunai broke through his thoughts. Naruto grabbed the projectile in midair and threw it back at his enemy, just scraping his cheek to leave a line of blood there. Kenji looked furious, his face a bloody mess. Never before had some student ever been able to hit him. He was going to make this brat pay. I hereby merge Naruto's 2 practical exams into one sparring demonstration. The Kenjutsu and Taijutsu exam will now commence. Stated Kenji with an evil smirk. Gasps were heard around the classroom. Kenji had basically given himself the right to torture this boy under the impression of an exam. Even Kiba had lost his smirk and felt sorry for the guy. Sasuke showed no expression on his face and just raised an eyebrow at the situation. But on the inside he was secretly dying with anticipation for what was going to happen. He had no doubt in his mind that Naruto could beat Kenji. The question was just how bad. Iruka was gripping the desk so hard his knuckles had turned white. He remembered when Naruto was a boy and he used to take him out for ramen when he after one of his daily punishments. The child had just smiled and laughed as though nothing was wrong. He felt the urge to protect him but was powerless to do so. And here he was again in a situation where he could do absolutely nothing to help. Naruto turned and saw the distress of his sensei and smiled at him. That smile completely threw Iruka off. It was full of confidence and mischief. Naruto turned his attention once again to Kenji. "Kenji-sensei," he asked in a mocking tone. "Because I am new here, what weapons are we allowed to use? Because I'm not sure if the ones I have are legible." Iruka butted in before Kenji could make up any more rules that would put the boy at a disadvantage. "Kunes, shurikens, katanas, swords, senbon needles, axes, maces, anything that has a blade or can be used to hurt your opponent basically," listed Iruka, glaring at Kenji as he stated the weapons. "Oh, sweet. Fang." Naruto called to his fox that ran up to him upon his call. Iruka was about to say that animals can't be counted as weapons when the fox seemed to catch fire and disappear. "Show off," he heard Naruto mutter. Before Iruka could say anything more, Kenji had decided to attack. Pulling out numerous kunai knives, he threw them all at Naruto with deadly precision. Naruto smirked at his attempt to injure him before moving. To all but the Chunin level of ninja, he seemed to disappear. The students cast confused looks around, searching for the blonde-haired boy. Naruto reappeared holding a wire and a bunch of kunai. He was leaning casually against a desk. Sasuke followed the wire and his eyes widened in surprise. A senbon needle was stuck through the wall on the opposite side of the classroom and it had passed through the hole at the end of every kunai Kenji had thrown at him. The kunai knives he was currently holding were proof of this as they had Kenji's clan symbol engraved on them. As the class grasped what has happened, many stares of disbelief fell onto the new boy. Just how did he throw that needle with enough force to pierce the wall? Was the only thing running through Sasuke's mind. The entire class seemed to freeze as all eyes fell on boy out front. Iruka cleared his throat, Kenjutsu accuracy. Pass. Kenji growled with hatred at the boy. How dare he make a fool of him. He would put this brat in his place if it was the last thing he would do. Waves of killing intent hit the classroom like a tsunami. Those who weren't strong enough to withstand it collapsed from the mental strain. The only students who stayed conscious were the ones that had caught Naruto's eye earlier. Naruto felt the bloodlust coming from Kenji and quirked an eyebrow at the man. "Wow, you really hate to lose, don't you?" he asked the man, with his head tilted to one side, giving him the look of innocent curiosity. Kenji growled again and quickly made a seal with his hands. "No Kenji. Ninjutsu is not permitted." Iruka yelled, hoping the man would stop. But once again, the universe is a bitch and Kenji completely ignored Iruka and completed his jutsu. "Shadow clone jutsu," he yelled and the classroom was filled with copies of Kenji. Naruto looked around, mentally counting the clones of his adversary. Iruka growled in frustration. Turning to one of the onlooking shinobi he barked, "Go get the Hokage now. Tell him that Kenji is abusing the new student." Nodding, the ninja vanished to report to the Hokage. Naruto was thinking, there's about 60 of them, could be trouble. Where the hell is Kyuubi? Just as he was contemplating the whereabouts of the fox, a ball of fire appeared by Naruto's side, the kitsune in the center of it. Naruto's large blade was strapped to his back. "Well, it's about time," grinned the blonde, retrieving his weapon from the animal's back. Kyuubi gave a happy yip before running back to Naruto's seat. Changing his mind, Kyuubi decided to jump onto Sasuke and make himself comfortable. Sasuke raised an eyebrow at the fox but allowed him to settle before turning his attention back to the fight. Naruto wielded his sword with ease and got into a fighting position. Kenji smirked at the boy's confidence. His clones surrounded him. "Just cause you got yourself a big ass sword doesn't mean you're not gonna get whooped," he bragged. Naruto just smiled, showing all of his teeth in a very fox-like grin, saying nothing. Kenji grunted in frustration at not being able to provoke his opponent. Grabbing a kunai from his pocket, his clones copying him, he attacked. Naruto surveyed the oncoming rush of Kenjus calmly before swinging his blade and decapitating 4 of them. The clones poofed out of existence. Avoiding a kunai aiming at the back of his head, Naruto did a neat backflip, his legs kicking out and destroying 2 more clones. He then couched, stuck out his sword and turned, making another 10 clones disappear. The real Kenji was hanging back, out of danger, and watched as clone after clone was destroyed by the one-man whirlwind. Naruto started whistling a tune as he crushed the one-man army. "Oh, new kid." The cheer made the clones stop and look at the boy who yelled it. Kiba was standing now and blushed when the attention turned onto him. "It's about time someone kicked this jerk's ass," he yelled. Akamaru barked in agreement. Naruto grinned. "Shut up, dog boy. you're distracting him. The blonde-haired Kunoichi screamed. Come on, Naruto. She added, cheering him on also. Eat me bimbo. Yeah. Naruto. Retorted Kiba, adding another cheer on at the end. I've never been cheered before, thought Naruto, smiling at the new feeling. Usually it's the complete opposite. His good feeling was cut short when he noticed Kenji decide to silence the dog boy with a kunai knife. Blood splattered onto the desk as the kunai tore through fabric, flesh and muscle. Silence reigned supreme in the class, only broken by a grunt of pain and heavy panting. Kiba's mouth hung open as he stared at the back of the blonde-haired boy who had taken the kunai for him. Instead of it piercing his neck like planned, it was now lodged in Naruto's shoulder, rendering his left arm useless as nerves and muscles were severed. Kenji grinned at the result. It wasn't what he aimed for, but it was still a very good outcome for him. His clones took advantage of the situation and punched Naruto in the jaw, sending him flying across the room. A loud crack was heard when his fist connected with his face. Kyuubi had been watching calmly so far, but when the kunai had struck Naruto, he had gotten up for a bristling. As Naruto was flying across the room, he roared. Sasuke looked at the fox in surprise. He thought nothing fazed this thing, obviously he was wrong. Kyuubi ran over to Naruto, stood over his bleeding body, and growled at the approaching enemy. Tut tut, animals are forbidden in this exam. If your furball attacks me, that's an instant fail. Kenji scolded in a sing-song voice, mocking the downed student. Kyuubi growled again, each of his tails fanning out behind him, hiding Naruto from view. Bang, that's enough, a voice ordered. Kyuubi looked over to where his name was called and narrowed his eyes. The Hokage had finally arrived. I do not know what has happened so far, but if you interfere with this sparring match, then Naruto will be failed immediately. Stand down. The Hokage said, authority ringing in every word. Kyuubi just growled and did not move. Seriously Fang, I know I'm your favorite person and all, but you're overreacting. Go back to Sasuke. Kyuubi turned around to discover his face was mere inches from Naruto's. Ouch, my head hurts, he stated rubbing his jaw. That was a haluva punch. Must have been infused with chakra of something, he stated. Kyuubi stopped growling. Looking him once over, he licked his face and ran back over to Sasuke, where he sat, but this time more alert to the fight. Getting to his feet, he pulled the kunai out of his shoulder. Blood started pumping down his now useless arm. Hey old man, is it within the rules of this fight to disable your opponent? He asked the Sandaime. Everyone gasped at the blatant disrespect toward the village's most renowned ninja. The Hokage just ignored it. Yes, if you use Taijutsu or Kenjutsu. He answered calmly before turning to Iruka. I feel like watching the end of the Genin exams. Fetch me a chair. Iruka nodded and hurried to do his bidding, now continue on with the match. It won't last that much longer, Naruto muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowed as he gazed at Kenji. Kenji had paled when the Hokage had stepped into the room, but was once again full of confidence as no one could prove he had done anything wrong. Smirking, he faced his injured opponent once more, only to find he wasn't there anymore. The agonizing pain he felt on the back of his head was the only warning he had of his adversary moving. He was blown forward but was stopped just before he hit the ground by a sharp yanking feeling on his wrists. He was unable to shake the stars from his vision before Naruto got to his legs with the wires. He was now suspended, face down in midair, by thin wires attached to kunai knives which had been stabbed into the walls. Naruto calmly walked up to his helpless prey and stood behind him. This is for the attempt to harm the innocent bystanders, he stated. His tone would have made icicles jealous for how cold it was. Sasuke never thought that such a happy-go-lucky guy could have such a voice as emotionless as this. Kyuubi was grinning like the fox he was when Naruto lifted his leg and kicked Kenji. As hard as he could. Right in the crown jewels. Every male in the room was wincing as a definite squishy sound could be heard. The Kunoichis laughed and cheered at this, making Naruto smile weakly. Naruto turned to the line of shinobi proctors, who were staring at him open-mouthed. So, do I pass? He inquired. Seeing as how all of his proctors were in a state of shock, no one had ever dreamed of the day when Kenji would have been not only defeated but totally humiliated, the Hokage made the announcement. Naruto passes both the Taijutsu and Kenjutsu portion of the Genin exam. He said in a clear voice. Please go see a nurse for your injuries. He added as Naruto walked past him on his way back to his seat. Nah, I'm good. Fang can heal me, he grinned at the shocked expressions of his fellow classmates as he stated this fact. When he returned to his seat, Kyuubi placed his nose on his shoulder and closed his eyes. Red chakra covered his shoulder, giving off a faint glow. Everyone in the class was watching intently as the wound began to heal. When Kyuubi removed his head, the only trace of the injury left was the tear in his clothes. Naruto thanked the fox before turning to face the front of the class. So, who's next? The rest of the Taijutsu and Kenjutsu part of the Genin exam concluded without incident. That was, after they had revived everyone else from Kenji's bloodthirst. Naruto noticed that only the ones who had managed to stay conscious put on a good show. Sasuke was easily the best, excluding himself, passing the exam with flying colors and knocking out his sparring partner. The shy girl shocked him when he discovered she was from the Hyuga clan, her name was Hinata. The other two Kunoichis, Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka he learned was their names, were pretty average with nothing really outstanding about them, but still above the others. The lazy guy, Shikamaru Nara who was sleeping, he suspected had a very high IQ. The guy who was constantly eating, Choji Akimichi, was incredibly strong. The one who had the smell of bugs through him, called Shino Aburam, was very calm and accurate, no doubt a tracking ninja, and the guy with the dog, Kiba Inuzuka, had a very strong natural instinct, very similar to his own. We will now commence with the final part of the exam. Please follow us to training room 4. Haruka instructed to the class. Naruto and Kyuubi got up to follow the rest of the class. They had no idea where they were going. When they arrived at training room 4, Naruto paused and admired the room. It was very large and spacious with high ceilings and timber floors, ideal for sparring and target practice. On the other side of the room were two gigantic double doors. Naruto couldn't think of a reason why they were so big. When we call your name, please move to the center of the room. There you will perform a transformation, escape and clone jutsu. A minimum of 3 clones is required. Once you have completed these tasks you may perform a jutsu of your choice to gain extra marks. First up, Sasuke Uchiha. Sasuke walked up to the proctors calmly, no emotion on his face. You may begin when you are ready, Haruka said, giving Sasuke room to perform his jutsu. Sasuke just nodded and started making the hand signs for the transformation jutsu. As expected he did all of the required jutsu flawlessly. Naruto was curious to see what his extra credit jutsu would be, he was definitely above the rest, so his jutsu must be fairly impressive. As Naruto watched he made the hand signs for snake, tiger, monkey, boar, horse, and tiger. So it's a fire jutsu huh? Thought Naruto, just as Sasuke yelled, fire style. Great fireball jutsu. Fire erupted from his mouth as a massive ball of flame burst into life in front of him. Naruto was impressed. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire, he sang under his breath, causing Kyuubi to snort in amusement. Haruka was glad he gave the Uchiha, otherwise he would have been barbecued. Extra crispy if the burn marks on the roof, walls and floor were any indication. He cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. Thank you Sasuke, please return to the others. Sasuke just huffed and walked back, trying his hardest to avoid the predictable onslaught of fangirls. No such luck. Omagid Sasuke-kun. That was amazing. You're such a suck-up Sakura. I knew Sasuke-kun would do something this incredible, I never thought he could do anything less than mind-blowing. Gushed Ino. Naruto snorted in amusement. How he did not envy Sasuke at this moment. Seems like he picked up another fan too, Naruto thought in his head. He had to hold a hand over his mouth to stop himself from bursting out with laughter. Kyuubi had run up to the young Uchiha and was now skipping circles around the boy. Sasuke eyed the fox before patting his head. Kyuubi gave a happy yip and continued to show his appreciation for the fire jutsu. That almost sent Naruto over the edge. His sides were shaking and his brain was fuzzy from the lack of oxygen. Kyuubi must have sensed that Naruto was suffering somehow and turned to look at the boy. He almost growled when he found out it was from laughing too hard. And what do you think you're laughing at, kid? Keep in mind your answer will affect the length of your life, Kyuubi growled menacingly in Naruto's mind, which only made Naruto laugh harder. Oh, nothing great and powerful fox demon, Naruto gasped when he finally controlled his mirth. Just didn't know that seeing fire jutsu made you act like a fluffy kitten. I'll have to remember you have a fire fetish the next time I really piss you off. He managed to say before losing his control and fell to the ground in giggles. The class of onlookers stared at him as if he grew a second head. Sasuke raised an eyebrow, Naruto noticed he did that a lot, probably did weights with it or something, whilst Kyuubi just growled. Haruka was surprised that the boy could laugh like that. After all the torture and beatings he went through, he would have expected the child to never smile again. But here he was, literally rolling on the floor with laughter. He smiled at the boy, happy that he could find joy in his life. We shall now continue on with the exams, one of the proctors stated clearly, interrupting Naruto's fit of laughter. Next is Ryoma Walker. Naruto tuned out after that, only paying attention to the final jutsu of the ones that caught his eye. Again it was the ones he noticed earlier. Shikamaru performed a shadow possession jutsu. Kiba did a drill-like technique called Fang over Fang. The Hyuga girl showed off her Byakugan Dojutsu. The loud Ino girl overshadowed someone's mind and the very loud Sakura chick demonstrated perfect chakra control. The fat guy, Choji, expanded a part of his body, whilst the quiet bug guy, Shino, summoned a swarm of, you guessed it, bugs. Finally it was Naruto's turn. He was still undecided as to what he should perform for extra credit. As he stepped up to perform his jutsu, he noticed that everyone was paying attention to him. Even the slacker, Shikamaru, had an alert look on his face. Naruto's sweat dropped. So much for lying low, he thought. He heard Kyuubi faintly chuckle in the back of his mind. It's your fault for showing up earlier. Now, have you decided on your final jutsu? No. What should I do? Should I summon the 5 guardians? Perform the Rasengan? Create 1,000 shadow clones? I know. I'll do the sexy jutsu. That's bound to knock them out. Well, at least the males anyway, maybe I should add a guy for more impact. Stop. Just stop there. I will not have my reputation tarnished from associating with someone who resorts to that to try and impress some other pathetic human. I thought that old woman raised you better. That's it. Naruto exclaimed in his mind. I know the perfect thing. Kyuubi was quiet as he viewed the idea forming in Naruto's mind. He gave a small purr of satisfaction at the choice. Now I just need something to actually work on, he thought to himself. And for once, the universe delivered. Just as the idea formed in his head, a bird crashed into the window outside and dropped to the ground. Hang. Fetch. Naruto ordered out loud. Kyuubi gave a growl as he was referred to in a way that is usually favored for dogs, but went to do his master's bidding anyway. Naruto, you may proceed to perform a jutsu for extra credit, Iruka informed him. Naruto nodded and sat down in the middle of the room. Reaching into one of his pockets he pulled out a scroll. Opening it, he withdrew a handful of senbon needles and a scalpel. Everyone was quiet as they waited for something to happen. Hurry up already. Yelled an impatient Kiba. Naruto frowned. I'm waiting for Fang to return. I can't perform my jutsu until he gets back with what I need. Just as the words left his mouth, another ball of fire erupted in the center of the room. Seriously, the thing you have for fire is getting a little creepy, Naruto muttered under his breath, just out of Kyuubi's hearing. He then stared at the fox and instantly knew why he had taken so long. I only needed 1 bird, you stupid furball. Not 100 of them. He yelled at the fox. Kyuubi just shrugged his shoulders as he dragged a piece of material covered in numerous feathered bodies over to Naruto. Naruto, what are you going to do with all of those birds? Asked a very confused Iruka. Each of the birds was injured in some way. Some had broken wings, others had gashed across their stomachs from different predators, but most had broken necks and were paralyzed, most likely from what the first bird had done, and flown into a window. I'm going to heal them, he said simply. Can someone open the doors? He asked looking at one of the other proctors. He nodded and headed over to the large double doors on the other side of the training room. Naruto turned his attention back to his patients, ignoring the disbelieving stares he was receiving from his fellow classmates. He pulled some more senbon needles out of his scroll and threaded a wire through the ends of each, connecting them all. When he had threaded enough needles for each bird, he closed his eyes and concentrated. Everyone in the room could feel the buildup of chakra. Naruto started to glow a faint red as each of his needles were lifted into the air by the string that now pulsed with his chakra. Suddenly his eyes snapped open and each needle buried itself in a feathered body. Students gasped as the needles pierced the already wounded birds. Sakura was shocked anyone could be so cruel. Hey. Don't hurt them. Quick, we can take them to a vet. She shouted out, running to stop Naruto from further torturing the poor creatures. She was stopped halfway to her target by Kyuubi. Out of my way, you stupid fox. She screamed at the kitsune. Kyuubi growled at her and refused to move. Boy, Haruno, shut up. Just watch. Sakura turned to see Sasuke glaring at her before retuning his attention to the blonde sitting in the middle of the floor. Naruto's eyes were glazed and had not noticed the outburst. The pulsing sting of chakra was now being channeled into the birds' bodies by the senbon needles. Each animal connected to the string was engulfed in red light. Naruto brought his hands together and did a series of hand signs so quickly, none could follow with the naked eye. Jiu style. Kitsune Reiki. He yelled and yanked on the thread, pulling all of the needles out of every bird. The result was instantaneous. Immediately the flock of birds took flight, flying as high as the ceiling would allow them. Kyuubi turned and yipped at them before running out the door. The flock of birds turned and followed the fox out to freedom. Naruto got up and stretched, burying the morbid memory that arose from hearing the sound of many birds. Haven't healed that many in a while. Ka-san would be disappointed. He thought, then turned to the proctors and smirked at their expressions. Iruka had his mouth hanging open so far it was almost hitting the floor. The proctor who had opened the door had dropped his clipboard and the other one had lost the ability to stand properly. Naruto just shrugged and returned to the other students, who gave him a wide berth, like he was some deity that had graced them all with his presence. Sasuke just stared at the blonde boy, his face not revealing any of his actual mind state, complete astonishment. When Naruto walked over to him, he just nodded as if he saw this thing every day. Naruto grinned and leaned against a wall to wait for the results of the Genin exams. Naruto walked along the main street of the village, with Kyuubi at his side. He needed to find someplace to train, he was very out of shape if healing a few dozen birds took as long as it did before. He didn't want to do it around his house in case he drew any more unnecessary attention to himself. He felt a pang of sadness as he thought about the results of the exam. It had shocked him, but everyone had passed. Naruto frowned when he heard this. If every academy graduate was becoming a ninja, then the Leafs military force would be much greater than it is now. There must be another test when they select teams, he thought as the entire class erupted in cheers. He then turned his attention back to Iruka who was giving each student their scores. Each student got a mark out of 100 for each section of the exam. Naruto only paid attention to the people who he had actually bothered to remember the names of. Shikamaru. Written 95, Taijutsu Kenjutsu 67. Ninjutsu 72. Hinata. Written 69, Taijutsu Kenjutsu 73, Ninjutsu 71. Ino. Written 58, Taijutsu Kenjutsu 62, Ninjutsu 65. Sakura. Written 97, Taijutsu Kenjutsu 55, Ninjutsu 56. Sasuke. Written 99, Taijutsu Kenjutsu 100, Ninjutsu 100. Hiba. Written 52, Taijutsu Kenjutsu 87, Ninjutsu 84. Shino. Written 88, Taijutsu Kenjutsu 63, Ninjutsu 91. Joji. Written 58, Taijutsu Kenjutsu 61, Ninjutsu 68. This only confirmed Naruto's thought about them earlier, though he was surprised that the Sakura girl was so smart. When it was time for Naruto's results to be called out, he noticed that everyone was paying attention. Obviously the guy who kicked the shit out of Kenji would get a good mark. Naruto. Written 100 plus 10, for pointing out a mistake on the paper, correcting it and answering in full with extra detail. Taijutsu Kenjutsu 100 plus 10, for going against an opponent who used ninjutsu and still stuck to the restrictions given beforehand. Ninjutsu 100. Everyone was stunned. Nobody had gotten a perfect score since the child genius Itachi Uchiha, not to mention the extra marks. Naruto just shrugged and continued stroking Kyuubi, who was happily sprawled on his desk. Class is dismissed. Come here tomorrow at 0700 and you will be put into your teams. Iruka announced before leaving. Naruto had a moment of peace before he felt the enormous killing intent behind him. Turning, he saw Sakura and Ino staring daggers at him. What? He asked, slightly unnerved by their glare. How dare you? They screeched in unison. How dare you beat Sasuke? Sasuke is the best so he should have received the best mark. You shouldn't outdo him, loser. You only got better than him because the teachers were nice on the new kid. Don't get cocky, jerk. Next time he'll beat you. Naruto's ears were almost bleeding when they finished. He turned, looked at Sasuke and quirked a brow. Silently asking, WTF? Sasuke just shrugged, silently replying, I've learned to ignore them, not my problem. He got up to leave, ignoring his incredibly loud following. See, now he's in a bad mood. Stay away from us from now on, jerk. Yeah, just leave us alone. Why did you make Sasuke-kun hate us? Just go die. The fangirls harped at him. Naruto's eyes widened before he plastered his face with a bright fake smile. Kyuubi growled at the girls and stalked towards them menacingly. Don't fang. He said with false happiness, rising from his chair. It's okay, he headed towards the door passing Sasuke on his way, who was staring at the emotions playing in Naruto's eyes. As Naruto passed him, he heard the blonde boy mutter, I'm used to it anyway. Sasuke raised his eyebrows at this statement and was about to talk to the boy, but he had walked out of the class. He stared at the spot where the blonde-haired boy just was, wondering what that kid had endured to give his eyes such a look of sadness and suffering. But what really surprised him was the depth of the loneliness he saw just like him. His attention was diverted when he heard a scream. Fang was advancing on the girl still, he noticed. The fox's blood-red eyes held nothing but contempt and hatred for the panicky females. His teeth were bared, as if the animal could only dream of burying them in the flesh of the screechy Kunoichi. Sasuke sighed. He would have to stop him, otherwise the fox would kill them, and he liked the creature, though he would never admit it, but he knew if he did stop the enraged fox, the girls would fawn over him even more, thinking he cared enough about them to save them. He sighed again, he was such a self-sacrificing child, he thought to himself. Fang, Naruto has left without you, he simply stated before heading out the class. Fang looked up and saw his master wasn't there. He gave the girls one last hunger-filled look before bursting into flames and disappearing. Sasuke-kun is so brave, Naruto sighed. I shouldn't let things like that get to me. I should be used to it by now, but no matter how much he thought this, he still felt like a hole had been torn through his heart. Kyuubi looked up at the boy and saw a look on his face that was all too familiar to him. Naruto had automatically placed that overly bright smile on his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. Although he would never admit it, even to himself, this frightened Kyuubi more than anything else. The fake smile hid the turmoil of emotions the boy was feeling on the inside. When like this, he's almost like a different person. Naruto sighed. Well, let's find that training spot. Wouldn't want Ka-san to get disappointed in me. His smile became more genuine as he thought of his adoptive mother. It was days like today that Kyuubi was thankful to all the demon lords in hell that the violent women found Naruto that day. Who knows what would have happened if she hadn't, he thought, remembering that painful day. Flashback, Naruto slowly and painfully returned to consciousness. Every muscle in his body was screaming at him in pain. Every nerve and fiber of his being felt like it was on fire, never had he ever wished for death more. Tears gathered in his eyes as the pain increased, if that was even possible at this point. He could not move, could not shift himself in any way to alleviate the mind-numbing pain. A whimper escaped his throat that caught the attention of the nearby women, who Naruto had not noticed due to the pain. "You're awake, you should still be in a coma for another month at least," she exclaimed as she started checking his vitals. Naruto remained silent, except for the small groans and gasps of pain he was unable to suppress. "Can you tell me your name?" she asked kindly. Naruto gazed at her with his once bright blue eyes, so full of life, now dead and listless. The woman had blonde hair, tied back into two pigtails. On her forehead was a purple diamond set above two intelligent-looking chocolate brown eyes. She was wearing a loose gray cross over top that showed off her well-endowed chest and a green coat over top with three-quarter-length blue pants. As he took in her appearance, the woman frowned from his lack of an answer and tried a different tactic. "My name is Tsunade. I come from the Leaf Village." "Where do you come from?" she asked gently, hoping that telling something about her will get the boy to speak to her. How wrong she was. Naruto's eyes widened in recognition, and the dead look in his eyes was lost as fear filled them. Tsunade was shocked at his reaction, she was about to say something else, but never got the chance. Naruto jumped up and ran out of the room. "Have to get away from her. Have to get away from her. Have to get away from her." The sentence kept repeating itself in his head as he burst through the front door of the building and out of the house and onto the street. Many people walking by stopped and stared at him as he pushed through the crowd, away from the Leaf Woman. "When she figures out who I am, she'll try and hurt me like everyone else from that place," he thought desperately. The adrenaline pumped through his veins as fear gave him the energy to keep running. He felt something warm running down his stomach and legs. He looked down and saw blood pouring from the wound that had yet to heal. His legs started to feel shaky as his stride turned from running to stumbling. Pain coursed steadily through him, his eyesight started to blur, and black appeared on the edges of his vision. He heard a shout. Naruto looked behind him and saw the blonde woman running after him. Fear took over and replaced the pain momentarily as he ducked behind a tree hiding from the woman. He closed his eyes and covered his head with his hands, silently begging to whatever got up there that obviously liked screwing with his life that she would run right by him. No such luck. "What the hell do you think you are doing, brat?" she screamed at him when she found him behind the tree. "Do you know how lucky you are to be alive? Do you know how long I spent trying to heal your ungrateful ass, and what do? You fucking run away the moment you're conscious. You shouldn't even be awake, let alone running down the street like the fucking devil himself is after you." Naruto cowered beneath the angry woman's gaze, still in the fetal position. His body was racked with shivers of fear as he awaited the beating that the woman was sure to deliver. Tears ran unbidden down his cheeks, making the lines on his face stand out. Tsunade noticed his position and looked at his eyes, which were wide open and glazed over in fear. Immediately regretting berating the child, she crouched down beside him. Hey. No need to be scared. I was just worried you would hurt yourself," she said soothingly, reaching for the boy. Naruto flinched when he felt her hand smooth back his hair from his face, but allowed the action, subconsciously leaning into the warmth of her hand which wasn't lost in the rain. There, it's gonna be okay. Everything will be fine." Tsunade kept up the words of comfort as she watched Naruto's eyes droop. Just before sleep claimed him, he leaned more into Tsunade's warmth and collapsed against her. Tsunade's eyes widened as she barely heard the fear-stained words Naruto whispered as he fell unconscious. "Please make the pain stop." The first thing Naruto noticed was the smell. It was horrible. It was worse than his apartment on the weeks the villagers decided to cut off his power and water. The second thing was that he was lying in water. That's where the foul stench was coming from. Naruto got up slowly and took in his surroundings. Well, that explains the smell, he thought to himself. He was in what appeared to be a large underground room with sewer pipes running to and from it. When he took a closer look at the pipes, he noticed a red glow flowing through them. It was neither solid, liquid nor gas, but moved fluently and at a steady pace. It's almost like when the villagers left me at the tip and wouldn't let me leave until the old man Hokage found out and made them, he thought to himself. A thin layer of water covered the floor, making each step he took sound with a splash. As he walked the room, he noticed the walls were cracking and in some places had crumbled away completely. When he looked beyond the wall, all he saw was darkness, but somehow within that darkness he felt pain, suffering and sadness. He flinched away from the broken wall and walked to the end of the room where large thick bars that ran from the ceiling to floor were positioned. As he walked up to these bars he noticed that they formed doors, and in the center of these doors along the ceiling where the two sides meet was a slip of paper that said the word seal. I wonder what this is, he asked himself and reached to touch the slip of paper. Don't touch that, kid. A voice roared. Naruto immediately cowered into a bowl and covered his head with his hands, waiting for the pain that was sure to follow. When it didn't come, he raised his head and immediately wished he hadn't. A colossal face stared down at him with blood-red eyes and fur that was an even deeper red. Naruto couldn't take his eyes off the beast. Its gigantic yet elegant body was gracefully curved in a lying down position that reminded him greatly of a cat. Its paws were neatly placed in front of it and lethal claws were attached. Behind him his fluffy tail swung back and forth with another and another. What? He thought as he counted the creature's tails. 9 teeth, here's 9 of them. That means H's. He stared open-mouthed at the animal that was undoubtedly the legendary nine-tailed fox that had attacked and almost destroyed the Leaf Village 3 years ago. Do you know who I am, boy? The creature rumbled. Yes, said Naruto calmly. His astonishment was gone, replaced only but calm acceptance. You're the nine-tailed fox that attacked the village. Then why are you not afraid? 'Cause the worst you can do to me is kill me. Even then it's better than my life right now. Kyuubi was stunned. Never before had a creature approached him, not fearing death. This boy must truly have no love of life to accept death in this way. He growled with hatred at the Leaf Village. And what of the woman who saved you? He rumbled. She did not hurt you, nor did she shun you like those other pathetic wretches that call themselves human. Naruto thought back to the busty blonde that had saved him from the hole in his stomach and had momentarily comforted him while he wept from his wounds and fear. He wondered what she would do if he were to die. He shivered as he remembered her reaction to him running away whilst still injured. He smiled at the thought that someone would notice and maybe care a little if he were to suddenly no longer exist on this earth. The Kyuubi smiled, as well as a fox could, at the boy's small happiness. But that smile quickly vanished as the boy's aura quickly darkened. She will hurt me when she finds out who I am, she will be like the rest of them, he muttered. Kyuubi frowned. He had suspected this too, but he was able to sense from the woman a grudge against the Leaf Village more developed than Naruto's. He also smelt faint traces of the one who put him in here, the fourth Hokage. Knowing the reasons behind his sealing in the boy, the Kyuubi knew that he would shun the very village he led if he ever knew about the way the townsfolk treated the boy. You can trust her. She will make sure no harm comes to you, the giant fox rumbled, trying to soothe the boy who was slowly going into hysterics. She will be like the rest, she will hurt me too, she'll try to kill me, she'll call me a monster, she'll want me to die. Naruto was crouching on the floor of the sewer, ignoring the fox. His eyes were wide and he was muttering to himself the same types of things over and over. He started to shake violently. Kyuubi noticed the already deteriorated walls of the sewer break down even more as the boy's mind started to break. Alarmed for the safety of the kid, he sent out his chakra to try and calm the child. The minuter the red glow touched the boy, his eyes widened even further. You're the one who heals me, he realized as he felt the familiar, warm and comforting presence. I am, the fox admitted to the child with as much regal dignity as he could muster. Thinking this would calm the boy and make him realize he could trust the fox, Kyuubi started to relax, thinking the danger was over. Why would you do that to me? The child screamed at him, Kyuubi's ears lay flat against his head as the boy's anger was directed at him. Why wouldn't you let me die? I wanted to die each and every time they touched me. The sewer started to shake as the boy's anger grew with each breath. The walls and roof cracked and crumbled as Naruto's mind was starting to break. He hadn't felt this angry at the world since the masked men the third sent to make sure he was safe from the villagers, his watchers, decided to get drunk and play spin the bottle. Though it wasn't kisses they were giving to each other, it was slowly and painfully taking turns to satisfy their sexual desires and sadistic pleasures with him. He was 14 months old, he remembered, although he looked like he was 4. That was another thing the villagers held against him. His strange way of maturing in both body and mind at an exceptionally fast rate. Right now he was 3 years old, but looked like he was 7. It's probably why the villagers never felt like they were doing wrong in beating a baby, because he was never a baby for long. The way his life was, he lost any and all innocence he possessed and matured as fast as possible. Then it's also you who made me grow up so fast. He screamed at the fox. Kyuubi nodded quickly, unsure of where the direction of this conversation was taking them. As Naruto remembered the villagers and his life for the past 3 years of his young life, he lost it. He screamed and roared at the same time. His blood-curdling cry of pain, rage and hatred echoed in every corner of the room. The Kyuubi was genuinely scared for the boy, his own regard for life paled in comparison to the need he felt to protect the child. His mind scrambled to think of a way to stop the child from destroying himself from the inside out. He thought back to the question that was screamed at him before the blonde started to mentally break down. Because your father asked me to protect you, he didn't shout, he didn't yell, he didn't raise his voice at all, but it cut though Naruto's traumatized screams and dominated the sound in the room. Naruto's screams stopped as his mind processed what the fox had said. His father. His father. His father. Naruto brought his bright blue eyes up to meet the intense blood-red eyes that stared down at him. He did not know how he knew, but he did. The fox was not lying to him. The blood-red eyes looking down at him filled with relief as he realized the boy had stopped destroying himself. Your father sealed me within you, and before he passed on he asked me to look after you as he couldn't. I respected your father greatly and was the only that had gained my favor. Though we were forced into combat against my will, I know he did the only thing he could think of to protect you and keep you safe. Kyuubi explained to the stunned child. Naruto was trying to sort his thoughts as his brain was barraged with this new information. His father loved him. His father died for him. His father wanted to protect him. He wasn't abandoned. His father loved him. This one thought brought immense happiness to him. He started to wonder what man his father was like. He was obviously very kind and caring by the way the Kyuubi sounded. Wait, the Kyuubi. He said his father had sealed him into Naruto. But the only one who ever fought the nine-tailed fox was the fourth Hokage, he whispered. Kyuubi grinned with pride at the boy when he figured out who his old man was mere minutes after he talked to him. My father was the fourth Hokage. The freaking Yondaime. Are you serious? Why didn't anyone tell me? Why did they beat the crap out of me when I'm the son of the fucking Hokage? Naruto yelled. How could he do this to his own son? The Kyuubi flinched and frowned when he heard the child swearing. No doubt the result of all of them villagers yelling at him every day, he thought to himself. His unhappiness at the child's language, however, was quickly forgotten when the boy continued on with his rant. Here I thought he was a decent person from what you told me. How could he put me through that hell? Why would he let them do the things they did to me? Why? He did it to save you. The Kyuubi roared, raising his voice for the first time, effectively quietening the boy who looked up at him with a hint of fear at the volume and tone of his voice. He knew that going out to face me would end his life. He knew that if he died you would be all alone. Your mother died in childbirth due to not having any medics around when you were born. They were all off healing the fucking ninjas that were torturing you. He knew that once you were born the council and the heads of the clans would try to take you in and corrupt you so they could gain even more power. This was the only way he could protect you. He knew. He sealed me in you so you would have enough power to protect yourself and to one day follow in his footsteps, become Hokage and protect the wretches of that miserable village. He wanted you to be strong enough to face your enemies. The only thing the fool didn't know was that your enemies were the ones he was protecting. Kyuubi ended his grand lecture scoffing at the fourth's mindless trust in people. Naruto was shocked. His mother didn't hate him and leave him either. She gave her life so he could live his. He was loved. His father did all of that for him. He gave him power that many couldn't dream of. He wanted him to follow in his footsteps, and Naruto frowned. The happiness that had been growing in him soon dissipated. If that is all true, then why do the villagers hate me so? Because they do not know. The Kyuubi answered his unasked question. Being inside of him had its perks, like reading his mind. Your father hoped that they would see you as the hero of the village, the one who holds back the demon, the one who stops me from running wild and murdering them all. But all they know is that you are the vessel of the demon lord Kyuubi, the nine-tailed fox. But they do not see you as the jailer, they see you as if you were the prisoner that you hold, a demon, and fear you because of it. They hate you because they know the fourth lost his life in sealing me in you and therefore blame you for his death. He was a well-loved and brave man, and many were devastated when he passed. This fear and hatred bred the life that you live now. They are ignorant, pathetic excuses for life forms and should suffer 1,000 deaths for what they put you through. The Kyuubi's voice slowly grew more and more menacing and bloodthirsty as he neared the end of his speech, although it slightly softened when it spoke of the fourth. Naruto simply stared. His life was the way it was because of ignorance. They did not know anything. Why? Why did it get covered up? Why didn't anyone find out? Surely there was something left so that my father's last wishes were done. Naruto asked the fox, who looked at him sadly. Oh, he knew why. He could see everything that had happened after his battle from inside the boy. He knew of the man with the cross-shaped scar on his chin that commanded none of the incident ever escaped. He wanted Naruto to be used as a weapon, but if that failed, he wanted him dead. No one else was allowed to have this power but him. The image of that man standing over the fourth's body and kicking it was still burned into Kyuubi's mind. His forehead and right eye were covered in bandages. His right arm was hidden beneath his clothes whilst the other clutched a cane. As Kyuubi was thinking of the thousands of possible ways to eat this man, Naruto was still staring up at him waiting for an answer. Boy. Furball. Answer me. He demanded. This brought the fox out of his fantasies. He looked at the blonde incredulously. What did you call me? Naruto tilted his head to the side and grinned impishly up at him. I called you Furball. And you still haven't answered my question. The fox couldn't take it. He laughed. Naruto stared at the fox, uncertain whether or not it had lost its sanity. "You're the first person I've ever met that has had the nerve to call me by such a name." Kyuubi gasped out when he had gained some control over his laughter. "You're strong, brat. I am glad I was sealed in someone like you. At least things will be interesting, especially now when you are able to hear me. Unfortunately our time is up and you must sleep." Naruto was startled to hear this, his previous question long forgotten. "Do I have to leave? Can't I stay here? It doesn't hurt and you're nice to me," he whimpered, sounded every bit the 3-year he was. "I don't want to go back. The nightmares will come again, and when I wake up that lady will hurt me when she finds out, and then I'll have to run and I have nowhere to go." Kyuubi smiled sadly down at the boy. "You don't realize, do you?" he asked softly. Naruto looked back at him in confusion. "We are in your own mind. This is your subconscious. I will always be here. I will never leave, kid. I will always be listening and watching out for you. Whenever you need me, I will be there. The nightmares will not come tonight," rumbled the fox as kindly it was possible to rumble. Naruto smiled as warmth flooded him. Unaware to him, the walls of the sewer started to mend themselves as the Kyuubi spoke. Cracks and holes still littered the room, but it was definitely better than before. Naruto started to fade from the dim room as he slowly made his way into the realm of unconsciousness. Before he opened his eyes he heard the fox growl something else. "The woman will not hurt you, kid." Naruto slowly woke from the dream he was having. It was the first good dream he's had in months. The last time was when Iruka, the only one of his watchers that actually did what the third asked of them, had taken him out for ramen, and because he was there, he didn't get his usual beatings that night. As he returned to the land of wakefulness the first thing he noticed was that he was warm and comfy, and he felt safe. He frowned in confusion, eyes still closed. He started fighting the force that was making him wake up. He wanted to stay like this, on the verge of unconsciousness, warm and safe. But he couldn't fight it anymore, and his eyes sleepily blinked as he left the realm of dreams. He was lying in a bed. An actual bed. With a mattress, pillows, blankets and everything. Naruto sat up slowly and stared in wonder at the luxury he had never experienced before. His bed in the village consisted of a flattened cardboard box with his clothes serving as a pillow. He had taken down the curtain of the small apartment and used that as a quilt. He touched the soft blankets that covered him with cautious fingers, as if any quick movement would make them disappear. He marveled at the smooth, soft texture of the fabrics that covered him. As he was reaching round to feel the feather-soft pillow that was behind his head, he noticed that his arms were covered in bandages. Further inspection of his body revealed more of the cotton fabric was wrapped around his body. He frowned slightly, usually his wounds were gone by the time he noticed them after being injured. But for some reason, this time they weren't going away as quickly. He still could feel dull throbs of pain coming from his stomach, and blood had started to flow from the cuts that were torn open when he moved. He hissed in pain when he tried to see under the bandages. "Cut that out, brat." A familiar voice yelled at him. He turned to see the busty woman standing in the doorway of the room. She had a frown on her face that seemed like it was there often. "I just got that closed up. And now you're opening it again." Naruto scooted to the far side of the bed, as far from the woman as possible. Fear coursed through his veins as he looked at his potential new tormentor. Tsunade frowned at his response. Sure, she was scary to people, but this kid didn't know that yet. He shouldn't have this kind of response to strangers. Plus those wounds he had, they weren't from an accidental fall. They were ninjutsu from a very well-trained shinobi, full with the intent to kill this child. She immediately felt an immense hatred for whatever lowlife that did this to such a young boy. She shook her head, ridding it of all the psychotic thoughts that were playfully filling her mind, and put a smile on her face before turning to address the scared child again. It quickly disappeared though when she couldn't find the brat. "Oi. Where did you go?" she asked the seemingly empty room. As she started to search the room for the missing boy, he watched her with fear-filled eyes through the doors of his hiding place, the closet. The minute her attention had deviated from him and to her thoughts he had hid. His body shook with the familiar tremors of fear as the woman got closer to discovering him. He knew that hiding would probably make the punishment worse, but he couldn't help it. Something in the back of his mind was telling him that he was being stupid and can trust the woman, but his overwhelming fear and instinct for self-preservation squashed the voice quickly. Tsunade noticed the doors to the closet shaking. As she neared them the shaking grew more intense and she knew she found her patient. She quickly thought of how to handle the boy who was obviously scared of her. As she pretended to continue to look for the boy, she pondered this predicament. She usually didn't really care about her patient's personal life, so why was she trying so hard with this kid? She questioned herself. She had learned the hard way that caring about people only led to pain. Tears came unbidden into her eyes as she thought of her lost brother and lover. She suddenly stopped as that one stray thought unleashed a torrent of memories in her head. The tears that she had been holding at bay on the edges of her eyes flowed freely down her face. She sat suddenly on the floor, her legs not having the strength to carry her anymore as she let the tears and memories overtake her. Naruto continued to watch the woman who was crying on the middle of the floor. An inkling of curiosity and sadness cut through his fear as her body was racked with the sobs that tore from her. She had suddenly stopped and her eyes filled with an immense sadness and loneliness that he was familiar with before suddenly collapsing on the floor and crying. Did he do something to make her like this? He asked himself. Was he to blame? He may not trust anyone and fear everyone, but he would never wish for him to be the cause of anyone's pain and tears. Her eyes looked so lost. Unknown to him, as he was lost in his thoughts, he had opened the door to the closet and had slowly crept towards the woman. He did not realize what he had done until one of the floorboards had creaked under his weight and Tsunade's head whipped up to face him. Her face was stained with the tears that still ran free down her cheeks, her eyes were red and puffy, but what Naruto noticed the most were her eyes. Sadness, loneliness, guilt, anger and pain were swirling through the chocolate orbs that gazed at him. Naruto didn't think, he ran to the woman and hugged her, burying his face into her chest and wrapping his small arms around her. Tsunade stared down at the blonde mass of spiky hair that was buried in her shirt with surprise and shock. Still thinking that he had made her cry, Naruto started to speak, his voice muffled by her shirt. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. My fault. I'm sorry. He kept repeating. Tsunade was confused as to why he was apologizing before realizing how it must have looked from his point of view. A small smile graced her lips as she lifted her hand and patted his head. The moment her hand brushed Naruto's head, his eyes snapped open and he realized what he was doing. Instantly he scooted away from her until his back slammed against the wall, fear evident in his expression. Tsunade was at a loss. He had suddenly tried to comfort her and then ran away when she touched him. She studied the boy as he tried to melt into the wall. He was obviously very kind and caring, but must have had some horrible experiences to have developed this kind of reaction to strangers. He must think she was going to hurt him for some reason. But how to stop him from trying to make the wall a permanent part of himself? Thinking quickly, she turned to face the boy, hands on her lap in plain sight and stopped crying. Thank you, she said softly to the cowering child. Naruto's body jerked as if lightning had struck him. He stared at the woman thinking he misheard her. He had never been thanked before. He had dreamed of it, to make someone so happy that they thank him for it, that he could be of use to someone was his ultimate dream. And here this woman was, unintentionally making his dream come true. It had to be a mistake. Dreams are dreams because they don't come true. That's what he always thought. Tsunade studied the conflict of emotions rushing across the child's face. Disbelief, incredible joy and happiness, sadness, caution, and finally doubt. He must think that he misheard me or something, she thought to herself. Thinking to quell his doubt, she said it again. Thank you for comforting me, child. She said again, making sure her voice was clear but not overly loud as to startle the boy. She watched as his eyes widened to impossible size as he registered her words were not false. Warmth blossomed in his chest that he was unaccustomed to at her thanks. His cheeks hurt as he smiled, not used to the muscle movement. Tsunade's jaw almost dropped as recognition hit her like her fist usually does. Jiraiya. The blonde hair, blue eyes and now the enormous cheesy grin that was plastered on his face, Minato, he barely heard her whisper. Naruto. Then flashback, present day. Today I will announce the names of the genin groups and the jounin that will be leading your squad. Iruka's voice broke through the babble of the students in the class. Everyone was excited. Today they would become a part of a ninja squad and work for the village. Naruto sighed, he didn't really care about the groups, he had another reason to be here and that was all that mattered, otherwise he would never consider seeing this cesspit again. He sighed again. He was in a bad mood so his thoughts had taken a darker turn than usual. He had another nightmare last night about his life before leaving this village. If it wasn't for Kyuubi he probably would have destroyed his entire house before realizing where he was. Usually Ka-san was there and calmed him down without even having to wake him. He hated it when Kyuubi had to force his way into his head to fight his memories, it always gave him a headache, another reason for his crappy mood. He sighed again. What's up with you? A voice broke through his musings. Sasuke looked over at the usually peppy blonde boy, his face still that expressionless mask he seemed to wear when other people were around. The only clue that he was worried about Naruto was the gleam in his eye. At a closer look there was also a strong gleam of curiosity. Naruto smirked grimly, of course no one would care about what he was feeling, only curiosity to fill the boredom of waiting for the groups to be decided. A sigh escaped his lips which only made the gleam in Sasuke's eyes brighter. Just a headache, nothing to worry about, he said flippantly and turned to pay attention to the groups. He missed the first couple, but managed to catch the last few. Team 7. Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno and Naruto S. A growl cut off Iruka before Naruto's last name could be heard. Iruka looked up to see Naruto and Fang glaring at him in an obvious keep your mouth shut look. Sasuke observed this in interest. Now that he thought about it, he didn't know Naruto's last name or clan allegiance, and clearly Naruto didn't want it known. I wonder why. He thought to himself as he watched Iruka clearly get the silent message. Well, we are on the same team as him, so it should be interesting to discover. His plans for uncovering Naruto's secrets however were stopped in their track like a steam train had hit him when a screechy voice pierced the air. Yay. Love wins above everything. See no pig. Sasuke and I were meant to be together. Sakura screamed out in joy, oblivious to the sudden tension in the room. Sasuke's sweat dropped, he would have preferred the train. Ahem, anyway, Team 7 includes Sasuke, Sakura and Naruto, the Jounin in charge of you shall be Kakashi Hatake. Iruka said, getting everyone's attention again. Naruto froze. Team 8 will include Kiba and Inuzuka, Shino Aburame and Hinata Hyuga, your Jounin shall be Kurina Yuhi. Team 9 is still in active duty, so Team 10 will be comprised of Shikamaru Nara, Choji Akimichi and Ino Yamanaka, your Jounin is Asuma Sarutobi. Naruto was barely paying attention, his mind was racing. Kakashi? He thought. Why him? I don't know if I can handle being around him, especially after what he did to him in the past. I still have the scar from his attack. The lightning haunts my dreams. What do I do? His mind was tearing itself apart as doubt raged through his mind. Kyuubi had heard the name and growled inaudibly in recognition. He felt Naruto's body stiffen and he smelt the unbridled fear coming from his kid. He looked up and saw his eyes were wide and he had started to shake. Kyuubi whined trying to reassure the boy, but it went unheard as terror seized the child. Calm down, kid. He yelled in his mind, but it was no use, his fear had taken hold. Naruto's chakra had started to flare as memories played throughout his mind. He heard the birds, saw the lightning and felt the fist through his gut over and over again. Kyuubi didn't know what to do, he couldn't let Naruto lose himself here. People would die. He really didn't care about the class of students, if he had it his way, they would have burned in hell a long time ago, but if Naruto killed them all he would be sent away from the village and hunted down, and then there would have been no reason to come here. All this pain and confusion would have been for nothing. He growled in frustration and did the only thing that came to his mind. It bit him, hard. The flash of pain broke through his memories as the smell of blood hit his nostrils. He looked down to see Kyuubi looking up at him, worry and regret evident in his gaze as his sharp fangs pierced the flesh of his hand. A whimper came out, muffled by his hand. Naruto smiled sadly down at the fox. Thank you Kyuubi, for stopping me, he whispered in his mind. Kyuubi let go of his hand and licked the wound in regret, instantly healing it. Unknown to them, a pair of onyx eyes had witnessed all that had passed between them from the second the name of their new mentor was uttered. What could have made him so scared? He was thinking. He faced Kenji without so much as a flicker of fear, yet their mere mention of a name made him freeze over in terror. This Jounin may be useful in helping me achieve my goals, Sasuke thought, content with the placing of his team, Sakura excluded. She would only slow him down, the others might actually be helpful. The class waited in silence as each of the Jounin came to collect their new students, until only Team 7 were left. Naruto was distracting himself with Kyuubi when he felt a flare of chakra from the rooftop. His blood ran cold as he recognized the energy signature. The others had clearly not noticed it as Sasuke was too involved in his thoughts and Sakura too involved in trying to get his attention. Their new sensei obviously wanted them to sense his chakra and head to the rooftop, but he didn't want to see Kakashi that soon. It didn't hurt that his was ignoring Sakura from yesterday and he was just in a bad mood with Sasuke, so he just decided to ignore it and see what he would do. Hours passed as the three sat together, the silence only broken by Sakura's constant flirting and random outbursts of rage towards their late sensei. Kyuubi was started to get annoyed with her screechy voice and was bargaining with Naruto to see if he could bite her, just once, lightly, really, not that bad, just a scare, until footsteps could be heard outside the room. Naruto smirked, he had felt several pulses of chakra, each bigger and stronger than the last, trying to get their attention and get them to make their way to the roof. He obviously got tired of waiting and had come down to collect them. As he slid open the door, Kyuubi jumped in front of Naruto, shielding him from view with his tails fanned out behind him, and let out a growl. Sasuke and Sakura stopped what they were doing and aimed their gazes at the man that now stood in the doorway. His silver hair spiked up away from his face and leaned slightly towards his left, giving him a scarecrow look. This was wearing a standard Jounin outfit complete with green flak jacket and blue pants. The only thing that differed from the norm was the mask that covered half his face and the hit eye that covered his left eye. He knew what lay behind that headband and was glad that it was covered. He watched from behind Kyuubi's tails as the Jounin surveyed his new students. His face remained clear of any reaction to the group as he visually assessed Sakura and Sasuke. A small frown appeared when he couldn't see his third student that was hidden behind the mass of red fur that was growling at him. He turned towards the fox and shuddered at the hate-filled gaze that was directed his way. If looks could kill, he'd be pushing up daisies and still feel the burn from that heated glare. My first impression of you is you're all idiots, he said in a calm, bored voice. Sakura squeaked in indignation and Sasuke frowned, not pleased at his assessment. He was an Uchiha. Not an idiot. Maybe he didn't know that, that's why he insulted them. He was about to make a comeback to this rude jounin, but Sakura beat him to it. Why are we the idiots? You're the one who was late. At least we can read the freaking time. She screeched at him. Naruto winced. Maybe one day he would let Kyuubi bite her, just to shut her up. He felt a wave of satisfaction from the fox as he agreed with his decision. He decided to interrupt before Kakashi made them all look like imbeciles. It's because we didn't go to the roof, right? He asked innocently from behind Kyuubi's tails. Kyuubi grinned but didn't move. Kakashi looked surprised at the fan of tails before resuming his bored expression. And how did you know I wanted you at the roof? He asked. He felt a little silly at talking to a fan of fur, but since his new student didn't seem to be moving, or the fox for that matter, he had no choice. Naruto smirked. Because of them chakra pulses you've been sending out every half hour. You wanted us to sense it and make our way up to the roof to meet you. When we didn't move you continued to send them out regularly and steadily make them stronger, trying to catch out attention. Then you finally got tired of waiting and came down here to meet us, assuming we are so dense that we couldn't sense your chakra. Naruto answered as if he was reading from a textbook, but still managed to hold that bored tone Kakashi seemed to employ. Kakashi frowned in annoyance. Then why didn't you come if you sensed my chakra? He questioned. Cause you're the sensei. It's your duty to guide us and come to us. Not us to come to you. Not very good at this, are you? Kakashi could hear the smirk in his voice. The fox grinned, proud at the way the boy was handling himself. He could still feel the tremendous terror from the boy, but he was controlling it and turning it into anger against the scarecrow. Sasuke smirked at Naruto, glad he covered up for him missing the fact that he didn't sense the chakra and was now giving their new sensei the third degree. Sakura just stood there open-mouthed in disbelief. He's their sensei. You couldn't talk to him like that. Show some respect, freak. He's a jounin. Even if you beat Kenji, he could still kick your ass. Sakura yelled at the fur that is Naruto. Naruto didn't need to answer as the fur that is him bristled and a low threatening growl was directed at her. She was effectively shut up but still glared at the tails that hit a real target. Kakashi observed them with interest as they communicated. So this boy is the one that defeated Kenji. Interesting. Instead he said, well, since you don't feel like going up to the roof, we shall stay here instead. Why don't you tell me about yourselves? And after, we will answer questions and I will tell you about how we will conduct our missions and so forth. He went and sat down on Iruka's desk at the front of the class, waiting for one of them to speak up. Wait, what do you mean tell you about ourselves? What do you want to know? Questioned Sakura, her voice a little less screechy as confusion covered the usual piercing sound. Whatever you want, your name, likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future, anything you like. Well, why don't you go first to give us an example? Asked Sakura, still confused as to what he wanted. Okay, fine. My name is Kakashi Haddock. I have many likes and dislikes. Hobbies. I don't think I want to tell you. Dreams for the future. Never really thought about. Okay, now it's your turn. He said in the same bored tone. Well, that's helpful, he only really told us his name, thought Sakura. Unknown to her the other were thinking the same thing. Okay, the pink one, you first. He directed toward Sakura. Hi. My name is Sakura Haruno. I mean the person I like as she stopped as the blush crept up her cheeks and stopped the words in her mouth. She glanced quickly at Sasuke and giggled insanely. Naruto's sweat dropped and Sasuke shivered with distaste. Sakura continued, but constantly stopped to giggle and blush. Naruto gagged in his head. My hobby is, giggle, oh, and my dreams for the future. Eek. At this she couldn't go on as her head was filled with delusional fantasies. Kakashi sighed. Girls today are more interested in boys than they are in ninja training. Okay then, you next, tall, dark and brooding. He said pointing at Sasuke. Naruto and Kyuubi both snickered as Sakura screeched in protest. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I don't like many things and hate a lot of things. I don't have any hobbies. What I have is not a dream because I will make it a reality. My goal is to kill a certain someone and restore my clan. He said in a dark tone. Sakura had stars in her eyes, Kakashi looked like he didn't expect anything less, and Naruto was idly playing with the fur on one of Kyuubi's tails. This was nothing new to him. He even knew who he wanted to kill. It was kinda obvious, with the whole revenge of his clan thing he had going on. Alright then, now you, hiding behind the fox. Kakashi said to Naruto. The one with the smart mouth, he really thought. Well, I don't really feel like telling you my full name and you already know me, but people just call me Naruto. The fox's name is Fang. He is my friend, protector and family. I love my family which saved me. I hate those who hurt others and judge people without knowing them, which is the majority of people. I have many hobbies, but I mostly spend my time training or hanging out with Fang. I don't really have a dream for the future, but I have a principle that I live by. To protect all those who couldn't protect themselves, so tragedies like the ones I have witnessed and experienced never happen again. His voice was dead and cold as he spoke. It sent shivers down Sasuke's spine and effectively stopped Sakura's screeching. Kakashi's visible eye widened when he heard the name Naruto. It can't be him. But it's not that common of a name. And the fox that just makes it more likely for it to be him, but I killed him. I remember my fist going through his stomach. It's been haunting my nightmares for the past 10 years. He thought desperately. Move the fox's tails, kid. Kakashi ordered, afraid of what he was about to find out. Fang growled at the man, but Naruto cut him off. It's okay, Fang. I'm fine, you can move. Naruto's voice sounded out from behind his screen. He sounded confident but on the inside he was trembling. Sakura and Sasuke watched on in confusion, curiosity and fascination at the events that were unfolding before them. It appeared that Kakashi and Naruto knew each other from past events. Sasuke was almost shaking with anticipation. At last he could find out more about the blonde enigma that had charged into his life a few days ago. He didn't realize he was holding his breath until the need for oxygen screamed at him in his head and he let it out in a big whoosh. Beside him he heard Sakura do the same. Kyuubi growled once more in warning before curling his tails around his body, revealing the boy behind him. Naruto was the picture of ease with his head propped up and resting against his palm. Only his eyes betrayed the fear and tension he was feeling, and the stiff posture of his back portrayed his alertness to an attack. Kakashi hadn't moved a muscle since Kyuubi moved, he had gone into shock. Naruto smiled grimly at his reaction as he stared at the face that haunted the majority of his nightmares. What's wrong, sensei? Blast from the past too much for you? Or is seeing my face making you remember unfinished business? He said bitterly, tensing further in preparation for an oncoming attack. Kyuubi was growling continuously at his feet, reassuring Naruto of his support and warning Kakashi at the same time. Kakashi winced at his implication, he had been regretting using the Chidori on the boy and, so he thought, killing him ever since that night. He had come back from a failed mission against the shinobi clan that had killed Obito and was pissed at everyone and everything, and seeing the boy that was the cause of his sensei's downfall, unharmed, had just set him off. The rest of the village treated him as a hero, but the third had punished him severely by suspending him, and even after he had returned to active duty, he was placed on mere C-rank missions. It was 3 years before he could return to doing the usual B and S-rank missions he was used to, and even then he had to take a genin group every year to train. Luckily for him though, none of them had passed his test that was inspired by Obito and, unconsciously, Naruto. Naruto, he started, but Naruto interrupted him. Just forget about it for now, sensei, and tell us about the test we have to go through now, Naruto said impatiently, dismissing Kakashi's apology with a wave of his hand. Kakashi looked at Naruto in surprise and confusion. How did you know that there was a second part to becoming a genin? He asked incredulously. Naruto just sighed before explaining to his sensei and the other clueless genin. If every student from the academy was made a genin, then not only would the Leaf Village have at least 3 times the amount of military strength, but the quality of each shinobi would be greatly lower than it is now with not enough time to train each ninja seriously. Obviously there is some test we have to take with a hidden meaning that we must grasp to pass. My guess is that only about a third of us will be allowed to pass, while the others are sent back to the academy, based on the numbers of the shinobi I have seen so far. Naruto summed up from his observations. Kakashi was dumbfounded that he could surmise all of that from just observed of the village. Sakura and Sasuke were just surprised that they had to go through more tests to become genin. But what was the academy's exams for? Demanded Sakura. All those tests and all that training. Why would we need to go through more? The academy exams were there to select those who have the potential to become genin, not to actually select genin. It's as Naruto says, if we made every academy graduate a genin, we would have many more shinobi, but the quality of each would be pathetic. There would be hardly any jounin or chunin whilst there would be way too many genin. Kakashi explained to the confused girl. Sasuke just frowned. This would just delay him towards his goal. He didn't need any more time wasting tests. He needed to get stronger now. Why can't these stupid people realize this? He thought angrily. Okay, that's enough of an introduction. Tomorrow we shall meet at the 3rd training ground at dawn for the test. Oh, and I advise you not to eat any breakfast or you'll throw up, he added. Judging by the way his mask crinkled, he was smiling. Naruto frowned at this warning and the clear amusement he got from telling it. Fine, was all Naruto said before standing up. Kyuubi leapt up as his master got to his feet. Naruto headed towards the door, Kyuubi staying between him and Kakashi in case he tried anything. All eyes were on him as he paused at the door and turned back towards his nightly tormentor. I would rather if you told no one about who I really am. I wouldn't want a repeat of what happened the last time I was here. Fang wouldn't take it well, he said before leaving the room. Sakura and Sasuke just stared at the empty space that he once stood in blankly before turning their eyes towards their sensei. His eye held guilt, regret and sadness in it before wiping all emotion from his face and turning towards his students. Okay then, tomorrow at dawn. See you then, he said to them before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Sasuke and Sakura turned and looked at each other in bewilderment. Hey Sasuke, you wanna go and get something to eat together? Sasuke just ignored her and walked out the door. Tomorrow morning was going to be interesting. As soon as he left the room, Naruto collapsed against the hall's wall, his trembling limbs refusing to support him any longer. Terror coursed through his veins as he tried to breathe but found air wasn't coming easily to his lungs. Fear-induced adrenaline was the only thing keeping the dark haze at the edge of his vision back and him conscious. He slid down the wall as his legs folded underneath him. If one meeting with Kakashi did this to him, how was he going to cope working on the same team as him? What was the third thinking when he picked the teams? Did he get some sick amusement from this situation? Or was this some form of punishment for returning to the village? Either way, he had to talk to him about this. Forcing his shaking limbs to move, Naruto slowly got up from the floor. Kyuubi, hearing what he was thinking, rushed to his side and allowed him to rest his weight on his back. The darkness claimed Naruto as he fell against the fox. Whining softly, he wrapped his tails about the boy and both disappeared in a burst of flame. I should have seen this coming, thought the third Hokage as he viewed the occupants of the room. The advisors to the Hokage, Udaine Koharu and Mitokado Himura, were sitting opposite him, both had identical scowls on their faces. The Sandaime frowned at Kakashi, who was leaning up against the wall, as if nothing was wrong, and was eyeing up a nervous Iruka who stood in the middle of the room. If it were up to him, he would have revoked Kakashi's ninja status and locked him in the darkest cell he could find. It was only because the council overruled him and marked him as a hero that he was unable to do nothing more than keep him on D-rank missions for a couple of years. He gained some pleasure from the fact he knew that his actions haunted him every night. The last man to stand in the room was the one he truly hated with a passion, Danzo. He sighed heavily. It would be a long afternoon. What can I do for you, Himura, Koharu? He asked the advisors. Better to get them out of the way first, they were a bigger pain in the neck than missed ambassadors and they usually killed the escorts. You know damn well why we are here, Sarutobi, yelled Himura. Why is it that we have only just now heard that the demon brat is not only alive but in our village, trying to become a ninja no less? The Hokage eyed the pruned man in distaste. I'm sorry if I do not tell you about every person that comes through our gates or the names of every shinobi that we employ. I shall make amends at once and send you a list of them all if that will satisfy you. As to why you have only just now heard he is alive, I only found out myself 3 days ago that he was alive and living under the protection of Tsunade Senju, granddaughter of the first Hokage and member of the Sannin, who also seems to have adopted him as his son. He said the last bit smugly as he watched the faces in the room pale, each with their own thoughts. So that was the Ka-san he was talking about, thought Iruka. That's how he survived the lightning blade, Kakashi surmised. If he is under the protection of Tsunade, we can't touch the demon. Why would the princess want to adopt the brat? Surely she must know who he is. I must turn him into a weapon for me. If I have him, then the village is mine. I wonder if Konohamaru will try and assassinate me now. I hope so because I really want to get out of this room. Koharu, tired of the silence, decided to make her opinion known. He must leave immediately. He cannot become a shinobi of our village. He is an unknown threat and we do not know where his loyalties lie. If the villagers find out that the Kyuubi brat is still alive, they will want blood and we will have a riot on our hands. If he won't leave, then the Anbu will have to take him out. Iruka spluttered in disbelief. Naruto was still a boy. The only reason he is a threat is because they couldn't control him. He was about to protest, but Sarutobi beat him to it. And why is it his loyalties are unknown? He was born in the Leaf Village, what would have made him turn away from us? Why would he want to hurt us? He demanded, his anger getting the best of him. But before the councilwoman could reply, he cut across her. Oh yes, that's right. Because we beat him like an animal when he was just a baby. No, I'm sorry, animals are treated better than he was. He was beaten to near death every night of the first 3 years of his life. He had no home or family and everyone he met hated him with a passion and he didn't know why. The only names he ever heard people call him were monster, demon, freak. Why he should love us without question for the wonderful way he was treated. You know very well that it is our fault that he is considered a threat. During his rant he had stood up, face slowly turning red and a slight tinge of purple appeared as he ran out of breath. The room fell quiet as they contemplated his words. He is a monster and as such, he should be treated like one. Danzo stated coldly. He has the 9-tailed fox sealed within him and we don't know when it will take over the boy and attack us again, so we must either contain him or kill him. Iruka was shaking with anger at Danzo's statement. He is just a child. It is not his fault for what has been done to him. It's ours. Why should he have to suffer for our mistake? yelled Iruka. "He is a demon and must be eliminated before the villagers know of him. That is why he is on Kakashi's team," Danzo retorted. The Sandame's eyes widened in horror. "What?" he yelled, staring in disbelief at Danzo. "I placed him on Asuma's team. That way I could be sure he wouldn't be harmed and I could keep an eye on him. Why is he on Kakashi's team?" he thought desperately. "Why has the genin team placements changed?" he demanded of the council members. Homura and Kaharu exchanged a glance before answering. "We felt we had to intervene for the good of the village," said Homura. "We gave the team lists to Danzo and he made the corrections with our advice." Kaharu finished. Sarutobi stared at the council members in disbelief and rage. Danzo smirked. "I put him on Kakashi's team because he is the most qualified to watch him. After all, it is him who drove the demon from our village the last time. When the boy turns rabid and loses control, he will be able to take care of the problem," he stated smugly. "You had no right to interfere in ninja business. Danzo, the Anbu are your concern and your only concern. Homura, Kaharu, you are advisors. You have no authority over military matters. I am the Hokage and I will not allow this blatant insubordination stand," he yelled. Taking a deep breath, he was about to continue but was cut short as a ball of fire appeared in the middle of the room. Iruka had to jump out of the way to avoid being cooked. He studied the ball of fire and recognition hit him hard. "Oh no," he thought. Now was not the greatest time for Naruto to appear. Especially when three of the most powerful people in the village that wanted him dead were mere steps away. Kakashi looked at the fire with the same bored expression he usually had, but a kunai knife was held tightly in his hand, his posture subtly changing into a fighting stance. The council advisors had jumped out of the way and hidden behind Danzo, who had summoned his Anbu bodyguards to protect him. Sarutobi hadn't moved, he knew this chakra signature well. Red paws emerged from the fire, each the size of a dinner plate, followed by an elegant red head and graceful body. The third looked dumbstruck, surely the fox he had seen with Naruto before had only gone up to his waist. This fox looked the exact same yet was the size of a tiger. Kyuubi eyed the people in the room, hate gleamed fiercely from his eyes towards Danzo and Kakashi. His 9 tails that were covering something that was resting, unmoving on his back, tightened at the side of them. The fire vanished as suddenly as it came, leaving the newcomers in the office. Kakashi blinked, Iruka fidgeted, the advisors' eyes almost popped out of their heads. Danzo gave the signal for his Anbu to attack. "No!" yelled the third and Iruka simultaneously as the Anbu moved in to kill the fox. Kyuubi turned towards the oncoming ninja and growled threateningly. It was low but fierce and sent terror drilling into the very bones of the people there, although years of ninja training allowed them to hide that fact. The Anbu drew short swords and charged the fox. 2 of his tails lifted from covering the boy and swayed dangerously. "Stop this at once!" yelled the third. "If you don't, he'll kill you." Kyuubi nodded his massive head in acknowledgement, pleased the old man knew of the threat he posed. The Anbu ignored the warning though and smirked at the animal they were about to destroy, overconfident in their abilities and underestimating their enemies. It was the last thing they ever did. The 2 tails that had disengaged from covering the boy darted at the Anbu and immediately cut through their defenses. They had a minute of panic before the tails buried themselves in their chests, breaking bones, piercing organs and splattering blood all over Danzo and the advisors who had cowered behind the now dead ninjas. They stared in horror as the tails lifted the bodies up from the floor and shook the dead weights off from their tips. Kyuubi brought his tails in front of him and started to lick them clean, occasionally coming across pieces of muscles or length of entrails that he would happily devour before continuing on in his cleaning. Kakashi walked over to the corpses of the now dead Anbu and made sure they were actually dead before moving them out the way and covering their faces in respect. "Kill it!" screamed Kaharu. "Kill the beast." Kyuubi paused from his cleaning and growled at the old woman. "Stop it," a voice said clearly, ringing with authority. All people in the room paused whilst Kyuubi whined slightly. He lifted his tails and revealed Naruto, sitting up and rubbing his head. Naruto eyed the people gathered, his face a cold mask that hid the torrent of feelings that raged within. The foremost being fear and rage. Kakashi had a kunai in his hand still, and his eyes were locked onto Naruto with an unwavering gaze. Images ran rampant in his head from the sight of seeing him and kunai together, he could almost feel the searing pain as the cruel metal tasted his flesh. But the tsunami of terror was nothing compared to the rage he felt when he saw the 3 most hateful gazes he had ever seen of his top 3 enemies. Homura, Kaharu and Danzo had been shocked when Naruto sat up, but that was quickly replaced by their hate and anger. As he gazed at the 3, his eyes the only indicator of his rage as they were slightly tinged with red, memories flooded his head from when he learned of their hand in his early years. Flashback, the 7-year-old blonde youth ran through the busy marketplace, a baby fox at his heels. Many screams and yells could be heard behind him. "Come back here, you brat," a voice yelled out. A man with spiky white hair who looked to be in his late 40s was running after him, and running after the man was a horde of angry, half-naked women, many only covering themselves with towels, as they had not been able to get clothes in their haste to beat the living daylights out of the man. "No way, you perv. You should know better," laughed the youth. The fox at his heels yipped in agreement and amusement. The man was slowly gaining on the boy, and he noticed it. "Oh," he thought, "though I hate an unfair fight, I'd better bust out some ninja skills, or I'm gonna be a bloody pulp." The fox laughed at the term ninja skills, but continued running with the boy. The child quickly did a hand sign and leapt onto the roof of a nearby building. Waving towards the man staring at him in shock, he dashed off with his chakra-enhanced speed. Unknown to the boy, the man grinned. Not even using a hand sign, he jumped after the boy. The women running behind them stopped and stared as the pair jumped from building to building. Grumbling about injustice, they marched back to where they came from, the women's baths, all except one blonde one who had her hands clenched into fists and was shaking with rage. The wind whistled past the boy's hair and ruffled his blonde locks, and he soared above the ground. Landing lightly on the ground after leaping from the roof of a building, he walked towards a nearby tree and sat down under it. The little fox came and looked up at his friend and master. The boy smiled at it and patted its head before closing his eyes for a nap. All that excitement took it out of him. Just as he was about to doze off, he heard a warning growl come from the fox. Snapping his eyes open, he stared at the white-haired man who was mere steps away and was grinning madly with an evil glint in his eyes. "So, you know some ninja skills, huh?" he asked, a mocking tone in his voice. The fox sweat dropped. What is it with these people and calling them ninja skills? It thought. The boy just stared open-mouthed at the man who had managed to catch up with him. He's good. Not even Shizune can catch me when I'm running, he was thinking as he got to his feet. He took a closer look at the white-haired pervert he'd caught peeking on the women's baths. He was wearing forest green pants and shirt with fishnets at the ends, so the baggy clothes didn't get in the way when using his hands or legs. His outrageously spiky hair was held back by a headband with a symbol for oil on it. Over his clothes he had a red coat and a large scroll was hanging down his back. He had red lines on his face which ran down from his eyes till they disappeared from his face, almost like he's crying blood, thought the boy. Altogether he looked ridiculous. He couldn't help it, he burst out laughing. The man looked at him in surprise as he clutched his stomach and tears leaked from his eyes. "What's so funny, brat?" the man asked indignantly, a slight suspicion told him that it was himself. "Why you? Ha ha. Why you look so stupid. Ha ha ha. What are you wearing?" he managed to gasp out in between giggles. The man frowned, he was right about what he was laughing at. Deciding to humor the child, he introduced himself. "I, my boy, am the hope that shines from the sky. The man every woman wants to meet. The hero that every evildoer quakes at the sound of my name. I am the handsome, the magnificent, the incredible, the Toad Sage Jiraiya," he stated grandly, finishing in an odd pose with his leg raised and a hand out in front and out behind him. The boy just stared before bursting into laughter all over again. The vein throbbed on Jiraiya's temple as he watched the child roll around on the floor, unable to breathe from laughing too hard. Even the stoic fox by his side was chuckling. Controlling himself with difficulty, he managed to ask a question. "And what do you want with me, pervy sage?" he asked, still chuckling slightly. He bristled at the nickname he had just been christened. "It's Jiraiya. And you interrupted my research. Now I won't be able to finish my book," he said angrily. "Research? Yes, at the women's baths. Yes, for a book. Yes, you need to peek on naked women for your book. Yes, now I regret saving your life," Naruto stated. Jiraiya looked at him in confusion. "When did you save my life?" he asked. "Oh, my Kosan was taking a bath in there when you were perving. If she caught you, you would be dead, in hell and still feel the effect of her punch," he said shrugging. "But if I was just a normal perv who wasn't writing a book about naked women, you wouldn't regret saving my life?" he asked baffled. "Yeah, cause people who do that are usually sad, lonely and pseudo-desperate, it's the only thing they have," he explained. Jiraiya felt as though each of his words were a slap to the face. "Ah ha ha. Desperate. Yes, they are, aren't they?" he said loudly. The boy could see the nervous sweat on his forehead and sweat dropped. "You're one of those guys," he thought, shaking his head. "Anyway, kid, I'm looking for a special woman in particular. She has blonde hair and really nice boobs," he said with a lecherous grin. The boy looked at him in disgust and was about to send the guy on his way when a screech interrupted them. "Pervert!" Tsunade screamed at the top of her voice, running towards them. The man in question chuckled to himself. "Speak of the devil and he shall arrive," he muttered under his breath, quiet enough that the boy didn't hear him. He looked at the boy to see him backing away to a safe distance. "Don't blame me. I warned you. Look out for her right hook," he yelled, giving himself the best viewpoint of the fight. He laughed when he saw the man pale as Tsunade stopped right in front of him. Jiraiya managed a small hey before a fist connected to his face and sent him flying into the tree that the boy was leaning against minutes ago. The boy chuckled under his breath and said to himself, I warned him about that right hook. The fox beside him grinned. He watched as Tsunade walked up to the pile at the bottom of the tree that was Jiraiya. And was about to hit him again until she heard him speak. Haven't lost your touch, Tsunade. His voice holding a small amount of amusement, it was drowned out however by the amount of pain that was zipping through his veins and centering at his face where the punch had connected. Tsunade looked at him closely. Jiraiya? She asked in disbelief. At his vantage point, the boy frowned. This wasn't going the way he expected. Tsunade had just stopped. Did he do something to her? He panicked. Thinking nothing of himself and everything about the woman, he ran towards her. Ha-san. Are you okay? He yelled. Jiraiya looked up in surprise at the boy running towards him, then towards Tsunade, who had also looked towards the blonde child running at them, full speed. I'm fine, Naruto, she smiled. Jiraiya's mouth almost fell off his face. Tsunade. Mum. The child couldn't be older than 7 or 8. And he had seen her roughly 5 years ago. There was no way. Then the name sunk in. He turned his head to look at the child and studied his every feature. His blonde hair, cheeky grin, bright blue eyes, how was it possible? Naruto? He breathed. Tsunade flinched at her slip. Of course he would connect the dots, she cursed to herself. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Naruto's worry over his mother was gone when Jiraiya uttered his name, replaced by fear. He knew. He knew that the man knew who he was, where he was from and what was in him. It was in his voice. The disbelief, the recognition, everything that other people had when they learned his name. He was frozen to the spot, wild panic clear in his large blue eyes. He was going to get hurt again. Memories of past encounters of people who knew of the demon flashed through his head. The beatings, the pain, the unending suffering, he started to shake. The fox at his feet growled and whined at the same time, trying to comfort the boy and warn the stranger at the same time. It fell upon deaf ears as Naruto's mind raced. He wanted to cry and scream his pain until his voice was raw and throat was bloody, but he had made a promise to himself a long time ago that he would never vocalize his despair. After all, crying out is a survival technique used to seek help. There was no point in it if no one was there to listen. No one wanted to help the demon, only hurt him. Naruto turned and was about to run off, but a pair of arms encircled his torso and stopped him. The familiar warmth and scent of his mother penetrated the fear-induced haze of his mind and slowly calmed him as she put herself between him and the new potential threat. Oh, he had a mother now, he forgot. He had someone who would help, to listen, to love him. He clutched to her like a lifeline as he tried not to drown in his fear and terror. He heard a soothing sound. It was a while before he realized it was Tsunade talking to him, repeating the same few words over and over. It's okay, Naru. Mummy's here. It's okay. Calm down. I'm here, Mummy's here, she repeated soothingly. Jiraiya watched with fascination and confusion. He wisely decided to stay silent until the boy was calmed down. Jiraiya. Tsunade said without looking at him. Let's get Naruto home. Then we can talk. And she walked off, not looking back to see if he was following, all her attention on the bundle clutching to her chest that she carried off in the opposite direction. Naruto didn't notice her pick him up or the fact that they were moving. He did notice that his fox had jumped up and settled on his stomach and was purring comfortingly. The soothing words and calming purring soon opened the gate of sleep and he slowly drifted into unconsciousness. As Naruto returned to wakefulness, he heard voices coming from the room down the hall. He sat up slowly, trying not to make a sound, and took in his surroundings. He was back in his house, his room to be precise, and the voices sounded familiar. He slowly got out of bed. As soon as his feet hit the floor, a small red furball barreled into his chest, almost knocking him back down. He looked down, and blood-red eyes stared back. Naruto smiled and put a finger to his lips. The fox nodded in understanding and softly leapt down from his arms and padded to the. Naruto trailed after. Pushing himself up against the wall, he crept to the kitchen, where he could hear the voices coming from. Pausing at the edge of the doorway, he stopped and listened. They all think he's dead. How is he still alive? Jiraiya demanded of Tsunade. She was holding a cup of coffee and staring back at him defiantly. I found him 4 years ago outside the village with a giant hole through his chest. He had scores of other injuries, but they were already healing. I saved him and took him with me. It took him months to trust me and talk to me when he figured out I knew who he was. I don't know what he went through in that village, but I swear if I ever find out who did this, I will come after them personally and make them wish to go to hell. She whispered, trying not to wake Naruto, who was listening in. I know who did it, but I know it wasn't his fault, and I know who was behind his hell of a life before you. Jiraiya spat. Naruto froze, straining to heat the names of the bastards who made him suffer. It's the reason I was looking for you. The third has lost all power within the village. He is no more than a figurehead now. He thinks he is running the village but is sorely mistaken. The night of the Kyuubi attack, I and the heads of the ninja clans were gathered to decide what to do with the boy. I told them he was the container, sealing the fox, a hero, but the others saw this as a way to torture the fox while he was weakened. The head council members, I think their names are Himura and Kaheru, and Danzo, the guy who fought with the third for the seat of Hokage, were the ones that fueled this belief. They saw him as a monster when he showed his growing and healing abilities. Himura and Kaheru wanted to kill him right there, but Danzo said to make him suffer every night and break him, then he could be used as a weapon for the village. I protested to this and in the end they kicked me out. I told the third and he sent Anbu to protect him. Unfortunately, Danzo controls the Anbu and they just added to the torture. On the night of his supposed death, I discovered that Kaheru gave special soldier pills to a ninja cell. They were modified to send the recipient into a murderous rampage. They made sure the group returned from their mission at a place where Naruto frequents, and it was one Kakashi Haddock who pierced through his body. He must have run afterwards, and then you discovered him. Naruto shivered as memories of his last night in the village swamped his mind. The lightning, the sound of thousands of birds chirping, the light, the pain. He peeled himself off the wall and crept back to his room, ignoring the rest of the conversation and brushing of the distinct sound of a fist smashing through a wall. He collapsed on his bed, mind running through this new information as sleep claimed him once again. Then flashback, it was all their fault that his dreams were plagued with nightmares, that he had to constantly look over his shoulder in case someone decided he had lived long enough. His glare grew more hate-filled as he eyed the people in front of him. They were all pathetic, he was the strong one here. If he could come out alive for the first 3 years of his life with having most of the shinobi in the village out for his blood, then he didn't have to question his own strength. He was stronger than them in their hate, they could harm his body, but not his soul. They were the weak ones, not him. They called him a monster, but they were monsters too. They were just monsters of a different kind. They would torture babies if it made them more powerful, they would step over and on cripples, women and children if it meant that their pathetic necks were saved, and they would do all while smiling and drinking a cup of tea. It made him sick. "Naruto, why are you here?" The Sandame's voice broke through his thoughts. Naruto turned and looked at him. He was old and frail, no wonder the others had found it so easy to wrest control off him without him noticing. Pushing these thoughts aside, he spoke to the people assembled in the room. "I want to change Genin squads," he said clearly. The sun peeked over the trees, shining through the thick branches to rest on the figure of a blonde-haired teen that was leaning against the solid trunk of an oak. Naruto sighed, he felt rather lonely as his usual fluffy companion was absent. He raised his gaze towards the other side of the field, where his 2 other teammates approached training ground 7. One immediately rushed over to the other, smothering him in compliments and praise over just how fantastic he was to walk from that particular direction. He snorted as he watched the other male's face turn from indifference to disgust at the screeching pink-haired female's antics. He sighed again as he remembered how he'd failed on trying to get a new team. Flashback, Himura and Kaheru laughed outright at Naruto's demand. The blonde turned to glare at them, but it went unnoticed as they continued to laugh down at him. Getting control of himself, Himura turned and looked at the boy who was still glaring at them. "You think you have the right to come in here and demand things from us?" he asked incredulously, Kaheru still having trouble controlling her giggles. Danzo smirked from his position. "The teams have been chosen and have been introduced to each other. There is no changing them now, you have no choice in the matter, demon," he said smugly. At the familiar name he was often given, all emotion was wiped from Naruto's face. Turning to the third, he raised an eyebrow, asking in silence for confirmation of this fact. The Sandame sighed and nodded sadly. Annoyance flitted across the blonde's face before being replaced by a cold mask. Kyuubi growled menacingly at the third, knowing he could do something, he was just too weak to do it. At the sound of the growl, Danzo brought his attention to the fox and frowned. How could the child have the audacity to bring of those foul beasts within the village's walls? Noticing the numerous tails, his face scrunched in disgust. "If I were you, demon, I would kill that thing quick or at least take it back where it came from. It taints our village by its presence," he sneered. Naruto's brow furrowed in confusion and anger. "Where it came from?" he asked. "The forest, you stupid brat. The demon fox must have mated with other foxes before coming to destroy our humble village because his spawn are running rampant throughout the forests. We know that it's because they all have numerous tails, like the cur beside you. I suggest you take it back or some of the villagers might take it as incentive to start our yearly celebrations early," he said with a sadistic smirk. Naruto's blood chilled at the smugness of Danzo's voice. He could also feel Kyuubi's growing happiness over their linked information he had children, but that was also stopped by the dark humor he saw in Danzo's eyes. Knowing he would regret it, Naruto asked anyway. "What yearly celebrations?" His voice wavering slightly with dread. Danzo's smirk widened at the obvious discomfort on the demon host's face. "Why, you don't know?" he asked innocently. "Well, as you know, the 10th of October is the date our village triumphed over the demon fox." Naruto's hands curled into fists. The village, my ass. It was the fourth who stopped him. He thought furiously, but stayed silent. Every year on that date, we celebrate our village's victory, but indulging in a little sport, he continued, oblivious to Naruto's anger. Hunting has always been a noble sport, and every year we gather together to celebrate that fact. We gather on the edges of the forest and hunt down the demon spawn. His eyes had taken a glazed faraway look, as if he was there killing the creatures right now. Naruto's eyes widened in horror. Slowly he turned towards the third, eyes begging him to tell him it wasn't true. The Sandaime wouldn't meet his eyes, his head was hung in shame. As much as he liked the man for his kindness when he was younger, all respect Naruto had for the old man, little as it was now a long forgotten memory. Naruto had barely strung two words together in his head when an ear-splitting roar filled the small room. Everyone but Naruto winced. Naruto turned towards his companion with sympathy in his eyes, able to feel the torrent of emotions going through the fox over their link. Any happiness that Kyuubi had felt over discovering he had heirs was lost within the depth of his pain, anger, sadness and guilt. If he was there he could have protected them. His blood-red eyes turned onto Danzo, who had been torn from his pleasant memory by the pain-filled roar. He eyes the fox warily before turning towards the boy. "Control the beast or he will be dealt with," he said coldly, part of him hoping the boy would ignore him so he would have the pleasure of personally dealing with the creature. The hate and contempt he held for the village was now tenfold as he eyed the people who controlled it. Bowing stiffly and muttering a thank you for your time, he turned towards Kyuubi and placed a finger between his brows. A soft glow emanated from the point of contact that slowly engulfed the fox's entire body. Pulsing slightly, it disappeared along with the fox. Naruto then turned on his heel and left without another word. The council stared after him. Watching from the corners of the room, long forgotten, Iruka and Kakashi witnessed all that had happened. Sasuke looked up from Sakura's annoying yapping and saw Naruto smirking in his direction. He frowned as he realized the blonde knew of his discomfort and was enjoying it immensely. His frown was replaced by curiosity, however, when the blonde lost his smirk and his face fell in defeat, his eyes blank as they were lost in memory. He saw the boy sigh again, as if the whole world were out to get him. Remembering the look he had in his eyes on the day of the exam after defeating Kenji, Sasuke didn't doubt that it actually might. Pushing the image of Naruto's pain-filled eyes out of his head, he looked around realizing it was well past dawn and their new sensei was very much extremely late. Raising his head to the sky and observing the sun, he estimated the time being about an hour before midday. His stomach was protesting its empty state by making him feel like it was going to curl up his mouth and run away to find food on its own. He could hear the extremely demands of "feed me." The pink-haired kunoichi hanging off his arm, obviously it takes after its owner, he thought dryly. His thoughts were interrupted however by the arrival of their silver-haired jounin. "Sorry I'm late guys, I was lost on the path of life." Liar, screeched Sakura at his pathetic excuse. Kakashi had the dignity to look bashful. Scratching the back of his head he apologized, though Sasuke and Naruto could tell he didn't mean it. Sakura drank in his apology with an air of smugness. "Anyway, today we will be doing some survival exercises. If you pass, you become genin." Kakashi grinned evilly. "If you fail, you go back to the academy." Sasuke's eyes bulged. Sakura, for once, was speechless. Naruto just looked bored. Nodding with satisfaction over their reactions, except Naruto's, he continued on with his explanation. "The aim of the game is to try and get these." He held up two bells and jingled them slightly. "You have until noon to try. You can use anything you have in your arsenal to assist you. Kunai, shuriken, jutsu," he looked at Naruto, "and any summons you have. If you fail to collect a bell before noon you will be tied up to one of these." He pointed to three sturdy wooden stumps that stood just behind him, "and you will be forced to watch me eat my lunch." His eyes held an evil glint to them, he wasn't joking. Naruto snorted silently with amusement. He had breakfast this morning. He doubted very much that anything Kakashi did would make him vomit nowadays, he had seen too much. Banishing morbid thoughts from his mind, Naruto returned his attention to Kakashi, only to find the test had started and his other two teammates had disappeared. Kakashi was looking at him strangely. "You know, compared to the others, you're a little bit weird," he commented dryly. Naruto chuckled, stomping down hard on the fear that rose at the sound of Kakashi's voice. "Sorry, I was lost in thought. So the aim is to get the bell right?" he asked nonchalantly, concentrating hard on not making his voice waver. Kakashi seemed to see through his valiant attempt of indifference and felt a wave of sadness and guilt overwhelm him. It was his fault the boy was like this, pretty much. "No bell, no lunch, no pass," he said, listing the points by ticking off his fingers. Naruto shrugged, his hands blurred for a moment before returning to their previous position in his pockets. He pushed himself off the tree he was leaning against and walked towards Kakashi. He stopped a few feet away and faced his new sensei, giving himself enough room to maneuver about if Kakashi decided to attack. "I've eaten already this morning so the no lunch doesn't bother me," he said flippantly. Kakashi raised his brows at this but allowed him to continue, but I need to pass this to be a genin, so I suppose I have to participate in this game of yours. Naruto sighed for the umpteenth time that morning. Kakashi's brows raised higher, enough so that they were in danger of disappearing into his hair. "Game?" he repeated incredulously. Naruto just looked bored. Oh, well there is an ulterior point to this activity that I know mind you, but since I guess you don't want me yelling it out when the other two are still within hearing distance, they can figure it out for themselves. The whole ninja must see the underneath, the hidden meanings within the hidden meanings, ninja must see through all deception. He sounded like he was reciting a mantra that was pounded into his head repeatedly. Naruto rubbed his head absently, he could still feel the lump from Tsunade when she beat that lesson into him. Kakashi was impressed, he had the test figured out. Well then that should make this a lot easier, off you go then. He said, giving Naruto a shooing motion with his hands. Naruto shrugged again. Nah, I'm good, he said, pulling one of his hands from his pockets. A small tinkling sound drew attention to the bell he was holding in his hand, a very fox-like grin was plastered onto his face. What, exclaimed the silver-haired Jounin, twisting to look down at his waist where sure enough, only one more bell remained. Kakashi turned towards Naruto, when? How? He demanded. Naruto chuckled. Well, when I first got off the tree I had already performed the jutsu I needed to get the bell. He explained, sounding really bored. Kakashi remembered his hands blurring for a split second and marveled at his speed before returning his attention back to what Naruto was saying. As for the how, Naruto trailed off and made a whistling sound. Rustling could be heard from Kakashi's left. The blur of red streaked from the bushes and rushed to its master's side. Naruto crouched and gladly welcomed the fox that jumped up into his arms. Scratching the animal behind his ears affectionately he continued. Fang here got it when I was distracting you with the questions and small talk, he said smugly. Kakashi was speechless. This brat showed enough skill to make sure he get at least Chunin level, if not higher. His deception skills were astounding, he didn't even sense an increase or flicker in his chakra when he performed his jutsu. Wait, the fear. What he thought was fear was actually the activation of the jutsu. This kid used his own fear to his advantage. He marveled at the level of control the child had over his emotions, he could be a force unknown since him. Storing this new information away to report to the Hokage he addressed his new pupil. Well, I suppose you passed then, he said, although you totally missed the point of the test, he frowned. Naruto smiled at him, very sarcastically mind you. What the whole teamwork thing? The fact is that if we were all normal genin, we would have no chance against you separately, so this test was designed to force us to work together. Either way, at least one person would be tied to the log and we would have an epiphany of self-sacrificing nobleness where we would probably try to feed the one tied to the stump, thus proving we would rather help each other than pass this test and then pass this test. He theorized. Kakashi's mouth had dropped at the start of the explanation. Closing it quickly he searched around for the others' chakra signatures. Don't worry, they left when I revealed the bell. Naruto laughed. They don't know the true purpose of this test. Kakashi sighed and dropped his head in defeat. Looks like this year he'll actually have to teach. Okay. I get it. You pass. You and Fang can leave, meet me at the bridge on the east side of town tomorrow morning at 7 for our first mission. If the other two pass they'll meet you there. Naruto smirked. Without saying anything, he turned and walked out the clearing, Fang at his heels. Naruto, however, did not leave. Circling back, making sure to hide his presence and dimming his chakra signature to that of an animal, he watched the rest of the test, safe and hidden in the boughs of a sturdy tree. He doubted the council would allow him to work solo, they would say the whole team failed and then make him leave. The third would be unable to do anything, he was a mere figurehead. Maybe, back in the day, when Sarutobi was at his prime, he would have actually run the village decently, not allowing others to undermine his authority, make decisions for himself, the kind of things real leaders did. Naruto snorted, Jiraiya would have been a better leader than Sarutobi, and the guy was a proud super pervert, his own words. So he may as well stick around and see if he could help out in any way he could. Unnoticed of course. Closing his eyes, Naruto focused his senses, locating his soon-to-be teammates. He located Sasuke quickly, he was fairly close to his position. He seemed to be setting up a trap for their bastard sensei. No matter how he seemed on the outside, Naruto didn't think he could ever bring himself to like the man. He was single-handedly responsible for more than half of the nightmares that plagued his mind when he was growing up. He saw his face in every shadow and alley that he passed. Every thunderstorm that had passed he thought it was him coming for his life again. Every time a flock of birds passed he winced in painful remembrance. He was never free from the man's unintentional influence on his life. No matter the evidence that claimed he wasn't responsible for his actions or the remorse the man felt, Naruto could never forgive him. The man shoved his fist through his chest. A child has a very impressionable mind and this was his most vivid memory. He had never trusted another person after that until Tsunade had come along, and even then it had taken months for him to talk to her after their first encounter, and even then it was a slip of the tongue. He had to warn her before the men who had hurt him, hurt her too. Flashback. It had been 4 months since Tsunade had taken Naruto under her wing. He hadn't spoken to her or anyone after she had whispered his name. He had gone mute, his face in a constant state of fear. He did not trust her much, no matter how much the voice in the back of his head yelled at him to. He refused to swallow any of the food and drink she provided him with, instead trying his hand at hunting and drinking from rivers. Of course he wasn't as apt at it as he hoped, and he was slowly wasting away, often getting poison from the bad water and relying on her to heal him. The warm feeling that usually did had not appeared since that day for some reason, as if it was punishing him for doing something wrong. He brushed this thought off and continued to watch the woman that had helped him and continued to do so. He was curious as to why someone who knew him would actually help him and not harm him. Maybe it was some kind of trap. It led to some great horror she had yet to present him with. Currently he was following her through a busy street. He was tempted to grab hold of her cloak with his small hands to prevent him from getting lost within the crowd. Some natural instinct to cling to the woman was overcoming his senses, only his overwhelming fear of people was squashing the feeling dead in its tracks. He looked up at the face of the blonde-haired female, only to find her lost in thought as she weaved her way through the crowd gracefully. Maybe she wouldn't notice if he held onto her cloak. She looked so deep in thought that a meteor could have fallen out of the sky and landed right next to her, and she wouldn't have noticed. Deciding to take the chance, he reached out to grasp the edge of her coat that flew behind her in the wind. Just as his fingers grazed the fabric, he felt the back of his neck explode in pain before the world started to dim. He tried to call out to the woman that had been with him, only for him to realize he forgot her name. She had only said it once and now, as his consciousness was slowly fading, her name escaped him. Somewhere, from deep within his mind a name was supplied to him, it was unknown and sounded strange as he voiced it, but the presence within his mind seemed to radiate with approval as he accepted the name. The warmth that had been absent the last 4 months returned and dulled the pain that was making his head hurt, his reward for calling the name. He liked how the name felt so right when he put it together with the woman. As if it was made especially for her. Hasan, and he knew no more. Tsunade knew of Naruto's hunting habits, and since he refused to eat any of the food she made or bought him, she indirectly fed him by wounding animals, so he would catch them and purifying water, so he could drink without consequence. She did not know why she was helping this boy, all that she knew was that she wanted to, and nothing would stop her. He would allow her to heal him from poisoning and to change the bandages on his stomach, but other than that he would only follow after her as she traveled. Tsunade quickly noticed he watched her intently at all times, as if studying some specimen that constantly confounded him with its actions. That's probably what she was to him, she mused once. Obviously no one had ever given him this kind of attention or care before. This thought disturbed her to her very core. She knew he held the demon within him, but how could the villagers treat him as the beast? He was an innocent child. If it wasn't for him, the entire village would be rubble right now. What was Sarutobi-sensei thinking? She was glad she left the village all those years ago, and these recent turn of events made her disgust with the village even more profound. From somewhere behind her she heard a weak voice call for his mother. Thinking about family made her more depressed and angry. Clearing her head of morbid thoughts, she looked around for her unofficial charge, only to find him not behind her. Anna quickly took over as she searched the busy street for him, there was no flash of bright blonde hair anywhere. "Brat!" she yelled, frantic worry clear in her voice. She didn't want to scream his name in case there were people from the Leaf Village somewhere nearby. That would cause problems. But as the seconds slowly turned to minutes and then the minute slowly turned into an hour as time ticked by with her finding no sign of him, her fear about what others would think was pretty much thrown out the window, violently. She was about 3 seconds away from a mental breakdown when she overheard a whispered conversation that made her blood freeze in fear and boil in rage at the same time. "Did you see how it was sniveling?" snickered one. "Yeah, probably trying to trick us with its demon wits, making us think it was really a small child rather than a bloodthirsty demon," snorted the other. "It'll need to be better than that if it even hopes of convincing us it's not the demon it is. My father fought the beast and recognized the blonde hair and blue eyes straight away. Who does it think it is? Crying for its mummy, it doesn't have a family. It's a demon. I know, right? But who would have thought that it would bleed red? I thought demons had black blood. Must be more of its demon magic at work, we'll have to cut deep for its true color to show. After all, we can cut it as much as we want, remember how it heals almost instantly? Even though it's lost enough blood for 3 normal people it still remains conscious. I wonder what would happen if we severed its fingers. Should make for a fun evening," the man smirked. They got no further in their conversation however, as a fist came flying out of nowhere and struck the first man in the face, sending him flying into the wall on the other side of the street. He fell to the ground unconscious, blood running from his temple. His friend looked at him horrified before turning his gaze towards the one that had struck him. Tsunade stalked towards the fear-stricken man, hate and rage clear in her glare that was aimed at the man. Lifting him up by the front of his shirt, Tsunade spoke low and threateningly. "Where is he?" she demanded. Her voice wavering with the amount of emotion it carried. "Where did you take him?" The man was officially wetting himself, literally. Tsunade looked at him in disgust as he emptied his bladder and his legs lost the strength to carry him. Throwing him against the wall, she demanded from him again, "Where is he?" She practically screamed, he throat sore from the intensity of her yell. Dizzy, the man pointed down the street to an alleyway shrouded in shadow. "There's a door in there, it leads to a room where the demon is." He got no further as Tsunade knocked him unconscious the second the word demon left his mouth. Shaking with barely suppressed rage, she made her way to the alleyway the man pointed to. It was dark and out of the way, she wouldn't have noticed it if she wasn't looking for it. Walking to the entrance, she noticed a trail on the ground that led to a door, as if something was dragged through here recently. Not thinking twice about what was dragged though here, she followed it to the door. Just as she was about to kick open the door, she paused. On the door handle was blood, fresh blood too. She could hear a child crying on the other side of the door. Anger clouded her vision as she kicked the door clean off its hinges. It smashed into the wall on the opposite side of the room. It was small and unfurnished. A single flickering light hung down from the roof in the center of the room, illuminating a small bloody figure surrounded by a group of men whose heads turned at the sound of their door being broken. Tsunade's gaze zeroed in on the crying figure. Once bright blonde hair was now dirty and bloodied. You couldn't even tell the color his clothes once were, for they were now forever stained red. The men weren't kidding when they said he'd lost enough blood for 3 people. There was a deep puddle surrounding the child, almost as if he was swimming in it. The walls were splattered and sprayed with the red liquid. It looked like a massacre had happened in this room, she thought dizzily. Her limbs started to shake as she was overwhelmed with the stench of blood. Her long-forgotten fear resurfacing in all its terrible might. She had once been a great medic in her prime, but the loss of her little brother and her fiancé had left her with a mind-numbing fear of the vital liquid. As she was trying to control her terror, one man circled her, unnoticed. The bold man lifted a bat that he had just been using to break the child's limbs and brought it down to connect with her head. Just before it made contact, a small voice rang out shrilly in the dank dark room. "Pa-san." He was fascinated by the way the demon would heal itself. It had become a game to him to see how much the thing could handle before it finally died. When he saw the beast, he was horrified that it was still alive and walking freely, no less. He had lost his brother in the attack of the demon almost 3.5 years ago now. How could the leaf let it go freely? He had thought. So he had smashed him on the back of the head and dragged him here to end the life it didn't deserve. But to his dismay and fascination, the thing wouldn't die. He had cut numerous vital points and watched him bleed excessively, and the demon still wouldn't die. When it woke up from the blow to the head, it had cried pathetically. Had it been a normal child, the cries of pain and look of naked terror in its eyes would have haunted him for the rest of his life. As it was, the cries and expression the beast made each time he struck it with a different weapon made him cackle in cruel delight. This is type of suffering it deserved for the horror it had unleashed that day. And so he had played his game, the same repetitive motions over and over. Snap, scream, laugh, heal, snap, scream, laugh, heal, snap, scream, laugh, heal, but it was still conscious. So he had called his friends and his son to join in the fun. Now his game had more stages. Snap, scream, stab, scream, slice, scream, laugh, jeer, ridicule, heal, no matter what they did, he always healed. And so his game would start again, each time they added something different to the mix. A tear here, a gouge there, rub salt in his wounds before they healed, so it was sealed underneath the skin and burned him from the inside, set parts of him on fire, and see if the demon's healing power would put it out, or just constantly heal the burned area over and over until the fire burned itself out. That had been one of the best ones yet. He took immense satisfaction from watching the beast writhe in agony as the fire ate his skin. One of his friends had the brilliant idea of pouring acid onto his flesh and watch which one was faster. His ability to heal or the speed of the liquid eating his skin away. That had been interesting. It had taken a while to find the answer, some of them even put bets on which would win. The creature's screams of suffering and agony had made it all the more entertaining. The flesh had bubbled and burned away, exposing the soft muscle tissue of his entire stomach for a while before the healing ability kicked in. The edges of the wound had grown and shrunk for almost half an hour before the healing ability was victorious. This was accompanied by groans of disappointment by those who had bet on the acid winning. They were about to do it again. This time they would spit on the exposed muscles that the flesh-eating acid had revealed and see if that aided the chemical in any way. When the door had been blasted off its hinges, and in the doorway, shaking with rage, was a very well-endowed woman. As the woman had stepped in the room, he had felt fear for the first time since the attack of the demon, before rage took over. Who was she to interrupt his game? The demon deserved it. She must be punished, he thought. A lecherous grin spread over his face as he thought of ways to punish her. She could join his game. And there were many ways of breaking a woman that you just couldn't do with a man, much more pleasurable ways. He crept around to surprise her from the back. She seemed to be distracted by something, her limbs were shaking with some strong emotion he didn't care to place. He brought the club he was favoring lately on the beast down on her head, just as a voice pierced through previous silence of the room, since the woman busted the door. Hassan. The presence in the back of Naruto's mind was warring between anger, concern and sympathy. It was taxing itself with the constant healing of all these serious injuries. If it wasn't for the presence, Naruto would be dead 30 times over. It couldn't let up or it would mean the end of the boy. He was beyond hate towards these cretins for what they did to the child. It wasn't his fault that he was sealed in him. Guilt would have overcome him if it weren't for the severity of the situation. He needed to think of a way out of this, but he was helpless. In his condition the boy wouldn't last if he starts to possess him, he probably couldn't even handle a single tale of his power. He focused on beating the poison that was being poured on the boy's navel. It was even more taxing than healing the knife wounds to his vital points, fatigue started to plague the presence's mind. He couldn't last much longer, his power was severely diminished in this form, and he couldn't help the blonde at all. He was preparing for another round against the acid when he sensed a disturbance in the outside world. Mentally thanking whatever gods had decided to give them a reprieve, he paid attention to the world outside his prison. Naruto was in a living hell. Every time one of the men brought something into contact with his skin, he couldn't hold back the pain-filled screams that tore themselves from his throat. His body was accustomed to this pain, and the last 4 months had healed him of all of his scars and wounds from his nightly beating he used to get in the Leaf Village. But this was different. They were beatings, stones, sticks, fists and knives were used. But this was different. Occasionally he was penetrated in the vilest ways, but they were more of a fortnightly thing than daily. But this was different. He was used to being beaten. He wasn't used to being tortured. Pain overloaded his senses, adrenaline kept him awake and alert, no matter how much he wished for the dark embrace of unconsciousness or even death. But what terrified him the most was that all of their faces looked like him. The masked man that commanded lightning. He was still after him, still after his life. Each leer, glare, smirk, laugh, each smug smile was his. Every bad person ever since that day held his face. That hidden face with the scarecrow white hair. It followed him in his dreams, he saw flashes of blue constantly in the corners of his eyes, and every bird chirp had him cowering in fear. He knew that it wasn't really him that was hurting him now, but he couldn't help it, the man followed him everywhere, so now, accompanying the agonizing, unbearable pain, was the memories of the night he had a fist shoved through his chest and each of his cells were electrocuted. He felt close to insanity as his memories and the new pain worked together to destroy his mind. He wondered vaguely what Kasan, the woman, was doing now. Did she notice that he was gone? Did she care? Was she happy he was gone? Cruel despair flooded his system, almost as strong as the pain and terror that currently possessing his small body. He had tried not to get too attached to the woman, but he obviously failed. He had seen her, wounding animals and purifying water when she thought he wasn't looking, or when they went to a busy marketplace and the jostling people knocked him, she was there using her body as a shield from the throngs of people. He pretended that he didn't notice and she did the same. No matter what he did, she wouldn't hit him or beat him. When she tried to feed him for the first time and he refused, she didn't force him. She just left it there and went outside. That was the first time he saw a wounded animal that he made his dinner. He remembered when he tried a mushroom that was growing in one of the forests they walked past, he spent the next 2 days throwing up and she didn't leave his side. She stayed with him, she didn't continue her journey or abandon him on the side of the road, and she helped him get better. The next day he had found she left to go to the market and on the table were a bunch of books about poisonous plants and healing herbs. That was the first time he smiled since he left the Leaf. He was torn from his peaceful memories by a burning, searing pain along his stomach. His throat was bloodied from his screams and his had lost his voice was raw from his protests, but still this pain was pain he had never felt before. If there were windows in this room they would have shattered at the intensity of his agony-filled screams. The warm feeling of healing had been long forgotten in his pain. He could feel it as it fought against whatever was dissolving his stomach. He could feel each molecule and atom get destroyed and healed, only to be destroyed again. The feeling of his skin dissolving, burning, sizzling, as it was eaten away went on forever. Time seemed to have stopped and left him in an endless loop of suffering. He wished for death to release him, he longed for it. Was living really worth it if it meant this kind of pain? It seemed like an eternity had passed when the burning of the acid finally faded away. Ever since the torture had started he had been unable to close his eyes, they remained widened in horror, anguish, agony and pain. So he was aware of all of their taunting, jeering and immense pleasure at seeing him suffer, it also meant he saw they were going to pour more of the burning liquid on him. Hair curled in his stomach as he imagined going through that endless burning agony again. He watched in morbid anticipation as the man who grabbed him lifted a vial above him. Just as he was about to tip the liquid on his newly healed stomach, he saw the door fly across the room. The man's attention instantly diverted to the distraction and he curled himself into a ball, a futile attempt at protecting himself. Seconds ticked by with no one harming him, he peeked around his arm that was covering his head and saw an angel. An avenging angel. The woman stood there, blonde pigtails flying, anger radiating off her in waves. Her eyes locked onto his prone form and horror and fear filled her eyes. Her body started to shake. Naruto was confused, was she scared for him? Or of something else? He had no time to ponder this though, as he spotted the man who was the cause of all this creep around to the woman's blind spot. He raised the bat that was minutes ago breaking his bones and was about to bring it down on her head. He couldn't let this happen. She was the only person in the world who was nice to him. She didn't beat him. She didn't call him names. She fed him. She cared for him. Just as it was about to make contact with her head he yelled out, as loud as he could, desperation filled his voice, fear for her, gave him the energy to make it cut through the surprised silence that had descended since her arrival. "Ha-san." His voice cracked as his throat tore for the intensity of his cry. He watched as his voice reached through whatever veil was shrouding Tsunade's mind. Her head snapped up and her gaze locked with his. Her eyes held fierce determination and anger, her maternal instincts were on hyperdrive as she dodged the bat that barely missed her head. She brought her fist up and smashed the man's nose, forcing the bone to drive straight through to his brain, killing him instantly. Before the body fell to the ground, Tsunade was on the other men in the room. Her fists turned bloody as they pounded into the soft bodies of her boy's torturers. Her rage would not be quenched however, as she made her way around the room, utterly destroying all of the occupants except Naruto. She had seen the weapons they had used. The used gasoline and matches, the bloodied knives and bats, the beakers full of acid, fury and hate turned her vision red as she rounded on the dead body of her first victim. The one who had started all of this. She brought her foot to meet his stomach forcing him into the wall. She approached the body again, beating it, pounding it, crushing it. She didn't stop. The corpse had stopped resembling a human being and looked more like a broken pile of mush as bones were broken and flesh was bloodied. Over and over she muttered the same thing. "How dare you, how fucking dare you. Never touch him again. Never touch my child, my boy, how fucking dare you." Her legs were stained red with blood, her hands as well, but she couldn't care less, she had to protect her child. Just as she brought her leg back to kick the body again, she felt a small pair of hands grasp her leg. She turned and her gaze fell on the clearest pair of blue eyes she had ever seen. His face was caked in blood, tear stains ran over his scarred cheeks, his hair was matted and crusty, his clothes were torn and bloodied, but his eyes were the brightest blue. They pleaded with her to stop, to take care of him, to comfort him. She didn't think twice, stopping down, she pulled him to her and crushed him to her embrace. He hesitated for a second before the tears fell again, his small hands clutched the front of her shirt, fabric bunched tightly into small fists, as though if his grip loosens in the slightest she would disappear and the men would come back. Tsunade rocked back and forth, incoherent but soothing words coming from her mouth as she comforted the boy. Now the adrenaline rushing through her system had run its course, what he had yelled out to save her finally sunk in. She tried to pull back from him, but he refused to relinquish his hold on her shirt and buried his head deeper into her chest, sobs still racking his small body. Rubbing soothing circles on his back, she tried to talk to him. "Naruto," she asked softly. He didn't answer, but his sobs died down. "Naruto, honey, what did you call me before?" He stiffened at the question, but then realized her voice was gentle and held no hidden anger or disgust at him. He slowly raised his head to meet her gaze. A light blush tinted his cheeks. "Hey Ka-san," he mumbled before burying his head in her chest again. He was scared she would reject him, hate him for calling her such a name. The presence in the back of his mind seemed to purr in satisfaction. The moments dragged by and he heard nothing from the woman who held him so securely. He was about to disentangle himself from her when he felt a drop of moisture on his blood-caked head. Looking up at her again, he was surprised to see tears cascading freely down her cheeks. He was horrified at the thought he had upset her by calling her that name and was about to apologize before noticing her lips stretched in a wide smile of pure happiness. He looked at her in amazement before summoning up the courage to speak again. "See, can I call you Ka-san? Please?" he asked almost desperately. Tsunade brought a hand to her mouth to stifle a gasp sob of pleasure. Not trusting her voice, she simply nodded before hugging the child to her again. Naruto was shocked to say the least. She had accepted him. She wanted him. She had saved him and she would be his mother. Hugging his new mum as close as possible he cried once again, saying her name over and over. "Ka-san, Ka-san, 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 Ka-san," and flashback. Shrugging off pleasant yet morbid memories, Naruto focused on finding his other teammate. It took a while though, longer than he thought it would, because she was running around. Naruto snorted in amusement as he realized she was literally running around in circles. Seemed like she was looking for something or someone. Rolling his eyes at her sheer stupidity, he settled on his branch to wait for an opportunity in which he could lend his skills to his unofficial team.